Tachio Rima was still clocked in after hours, chasing the Russian death finish so he could get out before the last train vanished, because Kachi had already promised himself he'd be home on time, so he could swing by the cat cafe and head home, but now this job totally throws his schedule into chaos. Tachi was 28, a straight-up salaryman, but lately delays stacked up and extra work kept piling on until his work life started to unravel. To clear his head, he started ducking into a cat cafe, because there, among those fluffy furballs, he felt totally at ease, kicking back and playing like he owned the place. Right on time, he slammed the last piece of work together just minutes before the train was set to leave. So Taki sprinted through a shortcut at full speed, desperate to make it on time. Then his eyes caught a gorgeous cat wandering around, and he couldn't help but stare. Taki took one look around and realized, yeah, fate was smiling, and luck hit him hard with pure joy. Then the cat bolted ahead and marched across the zebra cross like it owned the street. A truck roared in at full speed, barreling toward them at the exact same moment. Taki didn't hesitate for a single heartbeat. He sprang into action to save the cat. But as it all spiraled out of control, that accident ripped his own life right out of his hands. But just a few heartbeats later, Taki snapped back to consciousness and jolted awake, staring at a cozy house and a warm table waiting like it was calling him in. He stared around, baffled. This didn't look like any hospital. Then his doubts vanished the moment a cat slipped out from the table. It was the very same cat he'd been fighting to save, and Taki let out a breath of relief, thrilled to know it was safe. But just when he thought it couldn't get weirder, the cat started floating in midair with a hole in its head, grinning as it greeted him, Ante-eta. She fired off a few deep, heartfelt words of gratitude to Taki for coming to her rescue. But for Taisai, it was impossible to figure out what kind of trouble this even was. The cat leaned in and told him, "I'm the cat god," and even though she didn't need saving, she still thanked Taki for stepping in right up to the point where he gave his life to do it. Taki couldn't wrap his head around any of it, especially the part where he was dead. Then the cat god came back and confirmed it all over again. But she still decided to meet him in the afterlife because she'd heard from the cats he adored at the cafe just how much she loved them too. Taki couldn't believe it. His love for cats had climbed to the top so high it even reached the cat god. So the cat god said she couldn't stand the thought of someone as kind as him dying and offered him a way out. If he wanted, she'd send him to another world. But at first, Taki had no clue what she was talking about. So she told her this wasn't just a trip, it was like stepping into a whole other world beyond Earth. Taishi admitted he was terrified his stamina would fail him, and that thought made him doubt he could even make it in that other world, until the cat god looked him in the eye and told him not to worry, because she'd hand him the power he needed to survive. She let out a breath of relief, accepted the cat god's offer, and then asked how he wanted to live in the other world. Like, for example, maybe he becomes an adventurer, swings a sword, casts magic, and mows down monsters. Or maybe he asks for something totally different too. So think about it. What would you choose? And he refused to work anywhere that demanded fights, and he didn't want some shady back alley job either. He just couldn't stay glued to a desk all day, so after hours of thinking about his second life, Tachi finally snapped and said, "I've got it." And in another world, he threw open the doors to his very own cat cafe. The cat god damn near broke down in tears when Taki poured out love for her species. So she gave him special abilities, the kind that would help him pull off his very own cat cafe. She handed him the tamer power, a whole job built to let him wrestle monsters under his control. That's how Taki could train those cat-like monsters. And honestly, they'd probably feel like pure fluffy trouble the second they settled. Taki was all in on taming those fluffy monsters, so he grinned and joyfully signed up to become a tamer. The cat god even stuffed him with every tamer skill, then winked and told him he could pull up his status anytime by using the status open chant, so Taki wasted no time thanking her. Then, right after that, she thrust another bag into his hands. And the second Taki cracked it open, he realized the inside wasn't at all what he'd been expecting. A cat god revealed a magic bag that could swallow an endless amount of stuff, like it had no limits at all. And time froze in that bag so he could squeeze out every last second, while she packed in food, money, and whatever else she figured he'd need to survive. Taki grabbed the bag, checked it once, and boom. A window popped up showing every item inside, shocking him out of his skin. Then he peeked into the bag jerky, black bread, and a little water and turned to the cat god, demanding what the food was like in the other world. She shot back that it tasted pretty much the same as Japan, and yeah, they even tossed in monsters as ingredients. But the menu just didn't have nearly as many options as Japan did. It lit a spark in her head, and suddenly she had a plan. So she handed Taki a sharper set of skills, and once he got them, Taki wasted no time. He thanked her, straight from the heart. Just as she tightened her grip and got ready to hurl him into the other world, she thanked Tachi again because back then, he'd literally saved her life. And then he smiled wide, pouring out pure relief. Thankfully, she was safe in the end. After that, Taki got yanked into a brand new world through teleportation. And just like that, he blinked and found himself trapped in the middle of a thick, tangled forest, staring at trees stretching out in every direction. He remembered meeting the cat god, then getting ripped into her mission in a world that screamed, loud and clear, manga fantasy, dressed up like pure fancy spectacle. Now he started firing off ideas what to do. What to do next, then it hit him. His tamer job skill. And man, after getting exactly what he'd asked for, embarrassment hit him right in the face yet. Hey, deep down, he was thrilled, because now he finally knew what he was truly capable of. Then he popped open his status screen to scan every single skill he'd earned. In his class, there were way more than a dozen skills, and Teichi didn't just stop there. He had a whole stash of even trickier ones tied to language, insight, imagination, and shopping. Plus, it looked like he'd even stumbled into an ability marriage, saying the one every fluffy loved. And even every single level of that skill was fully maxed out too. So he could tame even dragons and other wild beasts like it was nothing, and just as that thought hit, a shadow swallowed the light over his face. And when Taki snapped around to see it, he spotted a dragon at least 20 times his size, all ferocious claws and towering horns ready to tear everything apart. That dragon locked onto Taki and claimed him as its next meal. And the second the thought hit Taki, he bolted to escape. A dragon blasted a roaring flame straight at him as he sprinted at full speed on pure instinct. Taki felt fear crash over him. Then he pushed that panic aside and hoped his taming might actually work on this dragon, because if it did, what then? He wanted a cozy, fluffy cafe, not a full-on dragon cafe. Right then, a new presence slipped in from behind the dragon, and it ended up being another deadly monster one that crunched the dragon's neck and finished it off in a single savage attack. Tate couldn't believe what she just saw, and shock hit her hard. But just like that, this shadowy beast snapped its head toward Teichi, like it could smell his power in the air. Then he slams forward toward him, ready to track him down and end it. Taki's fear hit like a truck, and with nowhere else to go, she had to do it. So he wasted no time and instantly unleashed his taming skill on that mysterious, wolf-like beast. In that gut-wrenching moment, Tachi flashed through his whole life, until now all he'd done was grind away at a brutal black company job, with almost nothing else to show for it. Then they burst into a cat cafe and let the cuteness take over. Escape the stress by cuddling up with fluffy cats and just letting them melt your worries away. He loved feeding them, and it lit him up, so he'd spend every last moment he could with them, whenever he got the chance. Hachi also kept cute cat pics on his phone so adorable, he could have posted them anywhere. Because Taki loved those cats, the cats couldn't resist either. Before long, they were itching to play with him too, which shot his fame through the roof with the cats. The life he lived back before he died, that's exactly what lit the spark in him, so he opened a cozy, fluffy cafe and finally chased peace. But then the real world hit, and everything shifted just a little, in a way that would change everything. He ended up blasting his taming on a fluffy, wolf-like beast about 2 meters long. Taki couldn't stop worrying using the Tammy Man, and Paul's could have totally backfired, right? And then it hit him he had that converse skill too, so he could talk his way out of this. Suddenly, that brutal beast started screaming, and he couldn't even process it. He'd gotten tamed that fast. That beast claiming a feral desire to be tamed instead of eaten by this follower, life utterly stunned him, and Teki froze in shock at the way it spoke. But deep down, he was just relieved he could finally talk back. The Fenmer wouldn't stop bragging that he'd one-shot a dragon. But then, Bammy got tamed, and by a human too. Taki awkwardly forced a smile, not knowing what to say after that. And then it hit him, if he lets his guard down right now, will he even be safe? Right then, he snapped his eyes onto Fenver's tail. He kept wagging that tail like crazy, and it was so fluffy it practically begged to be petted. Taki couldn't believe this moment, so he thanked the cat god with all his heart, then turned to Fenrir and asked straight up if she'd be willing to become his familiar. Then the Thunderer leaned in and grilled Taki was he really ready to bind the lone warrior, the Fenderer, as his familiar. Taki didn't hesitate. He confirmed it. Then Fenrir clocked how weak Taki looked and decided that was his opening. He had to stick close, or Taki would have been dinner for the other monsters thankfully. He convinced the Fenrir, and then he stepped forward and introduced himself. Fender Astaki was the one who gave him a name. Since monsters don't have one, she stared in pure confusion, then the Fenderer laid it out. Once a monster gets tamed, the tamer has to give it a name, and yeah, that part was basically obvious. Piki didn't see it coming until then, so he threw in the towel and finally thanked the Fenrir for teaching him because he was still a brand new tamer, and that Fenrir was the very first familiar he'd ever met. The Fenrir blinked in shock. He figured Teki would have been a total pro, but still, he leaned in and demanded Teki give him a name. Tachi started thinking and realized he couldn't just hand the lone warrior monster some cute little fluffy name and call it a day. So he sat there thinking, and then one name burst into his head like a lightning strike, and he demanded the Fenrir be called Luke. Taki told him that Luke means light, and with a name like that and Luke's gorgeous, shiny coat, shining like a beacon, he figured it had to be perfect. Luke stared at the fluffy fur like it was the only thing in the world that mattered, and grinned like it was exactly what he'd wanted. Taki thought it was downright adorable. Then Fenrir leaned in and declared, "From now on, I'm Shelby Luke." And yeah, it fit him perfectly. Like the name was made for a Fenrir like him. Tachi pulled Luke aside and demanded that he take care of him from now on. Taichi reached out and stroked Luke's fur. Then his hand sank right into it like it had swallowed him whole, which blindsided him. Taki had never touched anything as soft as this, nothing so. When he did, it felt like the universe just picked his perfect first fluffy familiar. Alright, let me set the stage and fill you in on how this world works. This forest sat in the southeast of Lorum in the kingdom of Shokuk, sealed behind a barrier because vicious monsters made it their home. And a whole crew of mages slammed spell after spell into the ground, stacking barrier upon barrier to make sure no nightmare ever escaped and trapped the monsters deep inside the forest. And when a monster with enough power shatters the barrier and barges through, the top-tier adventurers get thrown into the fight to hunt it down and put it back where it belongs. But some monsters were so brutal that even the barrier couldn't hold them back. Take Fenrir, the proud lone warrior. One of a kind, so legends about him were the only stories people ever dared to tell. Before he ever met Takeshi, Luke was just aimlessly wandering through the forest under blazing sunlight like it was any normal day. And every time he pushed to the spot where the monsters always came to drink, that monster would get terrified the second Luke showed up. And then he took off in panic because the deeper parts of the forest were packed with terrifying threats, pure overwhelming power, and a presence that felt impossible to fight. But Luke finally stopped freaking out and learned to live with the loneliness. So he decided to brand himself the Lone Warrior Führer because of it, and then he slipped into the water to bathe. Then he burst out, shook himself hard, and dried off his body. Luke stared into the water like a mirror, praised himself, and said he looked amazing today too. Then he kept the vibe going by entertaining himself the whole time. Then Luke's stomach growled like a warning bell, and he knew it was time to track down prey. He was determined to hunt down a dragon and feast on it right here, right now. So with that plan in mind, he leapt from branch to branch, tiptoeing across the treetops to quietly hunt for dragons. While he traveled, Luke couldn't stop thinking about what he'd heard. Some humans could cook food so good, it basically messes with your mind. Still, he never expected he'd ever taste a single cooked meal. Not when it was just him, Fenrir, and Yen. After what felt like forever, Luke finally spotted the thing he'd been hunting for. A massive dragon, exactly the kind of feast he had planned for lunch. He shot forward instantly, driving straight for the dragon's neck to strike it down. That's when Luke suddenly felt a human presence lurking nearby, and it really bugged him to spot it while he was hunting. But just when he didn't see it coming, Luke finally got tamed by Taki. And he still couldn't believe it somehow. He'd managed to tame it just like that. Which is why he knew Taki was built different like a real person. wrapped in this eerie aura, and absolutely not someone you could leave by himself. Luke figured Taki must be insanely talented, so he didn't hesitate to become his familiar. Then he discovered that Taki could do the exact opposite skill too. Luke stared at it, stunned. Still, Taki snagged Luke's attention instantly. The second Taichi didn't bolt away like every other monster terrified to face him. Luke respected him instantly, straight up thought he was 100 times better than all those cowards. Luke braced himself, sure the next moment would finally land him a name. That's when Taki pressed him, asked him to be his familiar. Luke nodded and told Taki, "Give me a name," and the legendary lone warrior Fenrir. Finally, Luke caught his own name. Then Taki kept pawing at his fur, and surprise curdled fast into irritation. So Luke snapped and demanded just how long Taki was planning to keep touching him. Back when he was a noble Fenrir, the legendary kind that can't be rattled so easily, and then Taichi apologized. Luke says he wants to hit the city and straight up asks if Luke knows the way, and Luke just shrugs. Yeah, obviously. I've got this. But then he snapped with disappointment. How could Taichi, a human himself, not know the way to a human city? So Taichi started thinking hard and wondered if Luke would actually buy it if he told him Taki came from another world. But since Luke was his first familiar, he decided to be completely upfront. So he leaned in and told Luke, "I've got something I need to say to you right now." And right after he laid out every last detail of his situation to Luke, now everything clicked. Those confusing pieces finally made sense after he learned the truth. He told Taiki this forest sat in deep, untouched territory where humans hardly ever stepped foot, and to even get inside, they'd have to break through the barrier first, with danger lurking everywhere. Taki didn't suit up in armor. She was dressed barely at all. Taki couldn't ignore it anymore. Right then, it hit him how bad this was. He was stuck in an unsafe forest, and he had to race to the city ASAP. He told Luke he was desperate to hit the city, but he worried the whole time what if it wasn't safe for a giant monster like Luke to go with him. Luke wasn't bothered at all. He just shrank himself to be a little smaller than a human. Taki was seconds away from heading into the city when Luke snapped, "Hold on." Since that dragon still hadn't tasted his bite, Taki got it and told him to go for it. While Luke dug in, Tachi couldn't stop smiling. Seeing Luke chomp down on dragon meat raw was downright adorable. Then it hit him. He could cook, and that skill might actually save the day. So he went for it and tried it on the dragon meat. He messed up because he didn't have the magic grass needed to whip up dragon steak. Luke lit up with excitement and asked Taki if he could use cooking skills, even as a total beginner, because he'd heard that even basic cooking can turn into seriously tasty food. Fire back your reply. If he's got magic grass, you can bet your last steak on it. Taki followed his razor-sharp insight and zeroed in on the exact grass he needed, snagging usable finds like magic grass, chanted mushroom, and flower. Taki sprinted off to grab the magic grass, and Luke pressed him like, "Why do you even need that stuff?" Taki whipped up dragon steak, using magic grass and dragon meat. And just from a glance, that steak looked absolutely mouth-watering. He shoved it toward Luke, and the second he sniffed that irresistible smell, he dove in like he'd been starving. And right after he finished eating it, Luke fell into a sudden, bone-deep silence for a few tense minutes. Then he burst out, saying the food was insanely delicious, so much better than chomping down on raw. Luke and Joey chow down on dragon meat using cooking magic so good it feels illegal. Soon, Luke slammed his meal down and wrapped it up. He told Taki to make him another dragon steak ASAP, since he could grab the materials he needed, dragon skin and nails, and sell them for sure to make some real money. Then he asked Taki if that was okay. Luke snapped back that, yeah, he knew money mattered to humans, and since he was brand new in this world, he had to get it. Taichi nodded along, and with a grateful nod, he decided to take the materials still unsure they'd sell, but no matter what, he went ahead and placed them. Stuff every last material into the magic bag. Taki was certain this was finally the key to making his dreams come true sooner than he'd ever imagined. And he needed cash right now to keep the cafe running, no excuses. Now all that was left was to race into the city. Taki tore through the forest at breakneck speed, holding on tight to Luke as he raced him forward. And he wouldn't let up, telling Taki to grip on tight and stay strong. Luke was struggling hard to stay on Luke as they tore forward at breakneck speed, which snapped him back to 2 hours earlier, when he'd cornered Luke and asked how long it would take to reach the city, and Luke had shrugged, saying it'd take just a few hours. But even after they kept moving for a while, Taki felt like they weren't getting anywhere near the city at all, because he was moving so painfully slow. So yeah, he ended up riding Luke, because he never guessed the city would stretch that far, even if Luke was still going to take hours. On their way, Luke shouted to Taki something monstrous was lurking nearby, and he was about to rip it down for good. Luke leapt forward and in a single shot dropped the giant bird monster dead. Then he demanded Taki stuff the monster's body into his bag because those valuable materials were about to pay off big. They stayed locked into that relentless pace, and Luke just kept mowing down everything that dared to step into their path. After those few stolen hours of sleep, he finally woke up. They finally hauled themselves into the city, and Luke wasted no time, he informed. And Taki, this city named Laura, was the second biggest place in the kingdom of Shulkuk. Taki stared out at the city, buzzing with people everywhere. And along the borders, people toiled in their fields like they had nowhere else to be. The city felt weirdly peaceful, and Luke said it was packed with both adventurers and soldiers, sitting on a killer vantage point where monsters barely even show up. Taki was relieved. Every single detail, especially how many people he could draw, mattered if he wanted to open his fluffy cafe, and now he knew it. So he set off for the city, ready to hunt down safe places to rest first. Luke mocked him as weak for choosing shelter first, but right when they were still trapped at the gates, the guard eyed Luke and asked if he was really sure that big wolf he brought wasn't dangerous. Then Taki cut in fast, saying it was totally safe. Since he finally pulled it off, the guard saw nothing wrong with it. He didn't mind letting Tussie into the city, but first, he demanded to see his ID. And that's exactly why Tussie got completely lost right after hearing about it. And there was zero chance his Japanese driver's license would fly here. So the soldier grilled him, asking whether he even brought one at all. So that meant Tussie needed 5,000 shells just to get past the gates. And before he moved an inch, he frantically checked whether he even had the money. So you gotta imagine this. He digs through everything the cat god hands him, and then, bam, he spots a wallet in the pile. Taki dug up 3 massive silver coins hidden inside the container. But the big question hit him. How much are they worth? He pressed Luke about it, but Luke was just as clueless. He had no clue what it was worth either. So Taki had no choice, and she fired that question at the soldier as her absolute last option. Taki chose to play dumb and watched the soldier's face like a hawk. And when the soldier spotted those huge silver coins, he blurted that he'd run off to get some change. Taki just grinned and asked if those would work perfectly. The guard nodded, and then he yanked out 5,000 shells like it was nothing. And he tossed them to Taki as change for a single silver coin, only to find out that one massive coin was worth a whopping 5,000 shells. Taki also wanted to stop and ask the soldier if he knew any nice places to stay. The soldier calmly told Taki to go straight, then swing left at the Adventurers Guild, because there he'd find Crescent Moon Namen, where one night set him back 4,000 shells, and the food was ridiculously good too. Taki grinned at that news, decided to investigate it himself, and realized one kid in this world was just as valuable as a yan in Japan. Now he came racing back to Luke. So he hit the directions, scanning everything around him, hunting for any clue or anything he'd need to know before he finally opened the cafe. Later, Taki roamed the city and everything felt awesome, like the world was finally on his side. Until he finally realized every single person's stars were pinned right onto them like Luke. Because with a wolf that big prowling the city, there was no hiding. Taichi stared at all the stores and realized he cannot leave without buying clothes too. And Luke practically urged him to make the right equipment his top priority. Taki shot back that he'd much rather have a real jacket, because those cold winds were sneaking all the way onto Luke's back, and Luke immediately labeled him fragile, and they raced to the crescent moon shape waiting just ahead. But nobody saw it coming. The innkeeper slammed the door shut on Luke, calling him familiar and refusing him entry. He basically told Tate, "Go on, look elsewhere," then slammed the door in his face. Taki couldn't stop wondering what they were supposed to do next, while Luke fumed because they weren't getting him where he could finally rest. Taki decided to shake things up, then went hunting for new work, something that could help him fuel his guild's next big adventure. As he went, his eyes snagged on a sign that read, Tamer's Guild. Taki figured they could hunt down a place that would actually let big familiars stay with them, and honestly, it was too good not to try for a bit. So Taki marched up to the Tamers Guild, and from the outside, it looked like any plain building, nothing special at all. Heichi pushed into the guild and started his greetings only to find the silence didn't lift. He searched the place and found nobody, while even the main hall sat in pitch-black silence. Like the whole place was abandoned until he was greeted and welcomed like he finally belonged by a bright, cheerful receptionist girl named Shelty. She walked up grinning and asked Taki straight up if this familiar of his was the Wolf King. Then Taki introduced himself and said Luke was really a Fenrir, but she laughed it off, swearing it couldn't be true, because the last Fenrir was spotted only a few hundred years back, and now they were just the monsters people whispered about in legends. Taki had no clue it was that kind of legend. Then it hit him. Now he finally understood why that soldier looked shocked earlier and blurted out that Luke was the Wolf King too. He figured it wasn't worth arguing with them for now, and Taki jumped in telling them he'd only just arrived from the countryside and didn't have an ID yet. Shelty cut in and told him to register with the Tamers Guild, because once he did, his registration card would basically serve as his ID. Taki felt a surge of relief. He'd totally tricked her with his made-up tale, claiming that Casey was sure she'd want to register with the guild. Shelty slid a form into his hands and demanded he fill in every detail to get registered. Tichi typed in his name, age, and all the details about his familiar Luke, then labeled the whole thing Wolf King. Luke instantly snapped, asking annoyingly what the heck Tichi meant by a Wolf King. He despised being thrown into battle with those pathetic monsters when he was still the proud Fenrir. And Taki snapped back that there was no choice, because Fenrir keeps getting called out by the monsters of legends, and it's happening right now. And Luke just realized right then that his presence here was straight up legendary. Hearing that made him beam then, he bragged. Like, if Fenrir really likes him, then there's no stopping it. We're legendary. Shelty told him to throw his skills in if he wanted, totally optional, because plenty of folks didn't want anyone sniffing around their strengths, and she also made him jot down whatever goal he had, and said there'd be plenty of missions where he'd have to battle with his familiars. Take caught the meaning and immediately started thinking it through. He decided to grind normal skills like cooking meals and other everyday stuff, while quietly locking away those rare, busted abilities, because everyone could tell they were basically cheats. He went all in on healing and curing, and for his big dream, he even mapped it out, planning to open a cafe called Fluffy Cafe. Shelty scanned his skills and her jaw dropped. He had recovery abilities, the kind that almost never show up for tamers. He asked Taki what he wanted out of life then. Taki blurted that since he's no good at fighting, he'd rather open a cafe and let food do the fighting. But he made it crystal clear this wouldn't be just another cafe. It would be a place where customers could actually interact with fluffy monsters. Shelty looked completely confused when you mentioned fluffy, like this world didn't even know what that word was supposed to mean. So, if that's the plan, he'd have to spread the whole idea across this world with his own fluffy cafe. And he was 100% convinced that anyone walking in would instantly feel happy, surrounded by all that fluff. After a while, Shelty showed up with Taki's very own Venturer's card, solid proof he was officially tied to the Tamers Guild, packed with his name Taki, his rank F, and the branch Lorem. She also said it doubled as his ID, so he'd have to guard it like his life depended on it. And he could swipe it at other places too. Shelty told us she had something huge to show, then leaned in and made him sprinkle a little magic into the card. Taki tried it, and Broomi's card instantly lit up with shocking new details. Right when he was about to ask Shelty what was going on, she cut him off and told him, "No, don't show it to her." And this was the only official info that showed up for a moment, then vanished every time he tried to use magic. Taki leaned in and asked what the feature was for, and she said it could help land referrals for clients, and it could even reveal if someone's involved in a crime or prove to the client that he's trustworthy. She told him nobody would drag him into revealing that secret, and for the gigs he wanted, he could just scan the request board sitting in the back. Taki noticed the requests stacking up. People wanted tamers to step up and care for animals like they were real caretakers. So Taki basically threw in the towel on fighting, said he couldn't handle combat, and instead he'd just play it smart, wait it out, and open up a cafe. Shelty thought someone like him with a wolf should have been all over combat quests, but Taki still played it safe and refused to risk his life. Then he asked her if there was anywhere he could crash with Luke, since the inn he tried already turned him away, and she understood, because Luke was huge. So she told him the Tamers Guild could house them to only 2,000 shells a night. way cheaper than an inn, and Taki's eyes lit up as he immediately said he wanted a room there. Shelty leaned in and asked how long he planned to stay, and he shot back, 5 days for now? But in that time, I've got to find a job. Shelty grabbed the lead and guided him straight to his room right as they headed that way. Taki burst into an open garden, and there were dogs everywhere, running around like they owned the place. Taki asked Luke to join in their playtime, but Luke snapped back, refusing to get lumped in with those dogs. Luke scoffed that a legend like him would never touch a ball like that. But Taki could see it. Luke was dying to play, and he'd do it the moment Taki finally bought him one. Shelty told him, "As long as you're in the guild, you can feel right at home here in this courtyard." Taki shot her a grateful thanks right after. She laughed it off like it was nothing at all, because Taki was a prize member of their guild after all, and if he ever needed anything, she made it clear he could come to her any time. Right then, Taki snapped a brutally painful question. Why weren't there more tamers here, right now? Shelty told him there probably weren't many tamers around, but still he couldn't believe it. Having tamers here at all was mind-blowing. A tamer fights like a dance with a partner, covering each other's weak spots and turning every battle into teamwork. But when the monsters get stronger, taming becomes brutal, and that's why it's seen as an advanced profession. Teki saw it the same way, and she finally felt relieved because someone else actually got her. She said that was exactly why she was relieved Taki chose to join them, and she hoped he'd stick around with them as long as possible. Then Taki nodded. Then he leaned in and asked Shelty if they bought materials. Here she shot back that it was the Adventurers Guild doing the purchasing. While every occupational guild only snagged the exact materials needed for its own jobs, Taki finally got it. Then he bolted straight to the Adventurers Guild massive beyond any other guild in the whole city. The receptionist counter was packed with dozens of wild adventures day after day. Taki never expected this place to be jam-packed with humans, and that grated on Luke's nerves. So Taki stepped into line for reception, and when it finally hit his turn, the receptionist snapped into a smile, motioned him to the counter, and told him to drop the material there so she could examine it. Taki said he couldn't dump that many materials on this counter, and the receptionist went wide-eyed because Taki looked totally empty-handed right then. Taki just smirked and said, "I've got everything right here in my magic bag." The receptionist snapped her attention with a shocked look and told him he'd stumbled onto something insanely rare, something the guy actually had on him, then gestured for him to follow, and Teki realized this bag was even rarer than he'd ever imagined. They dragged him straight to the dismantling squad, and the leader demanded he dump every last piece of material onto the table. Taki chose to go straight for the dragon, and the second he pulled out monster after monster onto the table, the whole fight ignited. Even that huge table felt way too small, and the dismantling squad froze in shock because it wasn't just a few monsters waiting for them. And these weren't just random monsters, they included big shots like dragons, red wolves, false spirits, and even platinum golems. Taichi was seriously relieved he didn't carry every single monster Luke had wiped out on their journey. After the dismantling squad checked the monster corpses, they froze every single one was finished with one clean strike, and they immediately demanded Taki's answer. "Did you do all this?" Taki smirked back that it wasn't him. It was his familiar's handiwork. That's what had the guys convinced he must be insanely high-ranking to tame, with that kind of power only for the truth to hit. Tachi was just F-rank right now. Then the guys grilled him about what monster Taki's familiar was, and he answered, a wolf king. But the moment Luke heard it, rage snapped in his chest. But Takipet brushed by his fur and told him to hold his temper because they had to sell these materials, and Luke absolutely melted at being praised like that. And when the dismantlers saw Luke with a wolf king who actually listens to him, they were blown away, so they dove straight into the job, tearing into the monsters and calculating the estimated price. Toddy stood outside, waiting for the dismantling to finally begin. Once everything was finished, the receptionist slid over to him, apologized for the delay, and then started rattling off the prices for his materials. She shoved him bag after bag stuffed with golden coins, and told him the 3 red wolves had sold for 100,000 shells each. Then she dropped the bomb. The wild boar went for 130,000 shells. The platinum gallon was fetched for 3 million shells all by itself, and that stack of loot hit a total of 3,430,000 shells. Taichi couldn't believe it, staring at the money like it was unreal. Now he had funding pouring in, and the receptionist leaned in, curious as anything, asking if he was really gearing up to buy some equipment or whatever. Taki leaned in and told her he's really got his sights set on opening a cafe called Cafe Fluffy. She heard it and her smile lit up instantly. She swallowed hard at the sight of him backing away from being an adventurer, but then relief hit her, because a powerhouse tamer like him was definitely coming to town, and that was the comfort she needed. She told him to make sure he'd stop by the Commerce Guild later. Taki decided to open his cafe, took her advice, and she sent him off with a sweet goodbye promising she'd absolutely stop by as soon as it opened. And Taki couldn't help but feel thrilled by that. So he marched back to the Tamers Guild, and Shelt met him with one question. Did you sell the materials? So well, if you fell bil ban sal mate. He leaned in and said he finally had the money to open the cafe, thanks to Luke, and now he's planning to head to the Commerce Guild tomorrow. But first, he has to track down the perfect property. Shelty leaned in and told him the Tamers Guild wasn't just training, they also owned properties, so if he wanted in, they had options waiting. And because tamers swing around huge familiars, the city outskirts are packed with special properties. Taki's ears perked up the moment she heard it, and he asked her if he could check out those properties. But Shelty told him to come back tomorrow bright and early so she could get a few of them ready for him. After that, Taki headed straight to his room to call it a day, buzzing with the thought of how much ground he'd crushed today fast and furious. And now, before he even checked the properties, he could finally see the rest of the house. He sprinted over to the equipment store to check everything out, and just as the dealer greeted him, he abruptly stopped mid-step when he spotted Taki's familiar face. Taki told the seller he could swing the familiar weight outside if it was needed, but the seller waved it off, saying everything was fine, so Taki thanked him for the thought. Taki spun around at all the jaw-dropping gear and soldiers' battle armor. Then Luke asked why he didn't grab one if he liked it, only for Taki to shoot it down, saying it was too heavy for him, and Luke immediately fired back, calling him weak. Then Luke suddenly spotted something wild and pointed at it like, that one. The Tichi sight was basically a light jacket so soft it felt like a dream the second you touched it, and he went for it. Luke even said that jacket looked way better than the plain clothes he was stuck in right now. Taki figured if his master truly cared, he'd at least put some real effort into his look, so that demand became another reason Taki went and bought it. He marched up to the shopkeeper and the guy stared in shock, asking if Taki was really a tamer since he'd never seen a wolf this huge techie, then explained that Luke was his important partner. And just like that, the shopkeeper clocked Luke as the Wolf King, something you almost never see these days. He couldn't help but admire Luke's slick coat too, and when Luke heard that praise, it hit the spot because compliments clearly sent him to cloud 9. When the conversation swung to coats, Taki seized the moment and told the shopkeeper he was planning to open a cafe where people could hang out with fluffy monsters, and the shopkeeper's eyes lit up, promising he'd come try it the second it opened. Taki left feeling honestly thrilled. He grabbed a change of regular clothes and headed back to the property talk right when he reached the Tamers Guild. Shelty lit up and greeted him with a bright, "Good morning!" Taki leaned in and demanded to know if she could track down any spots for him. Sheldon grinned, weaned in, and told him she'd found a killer spot right near the Tamers Guild. And because it was already packed and noisy, it sounded like the perfect spot for a cafe, yet Taki wanted something calmer, so Shelton next pointed him to a better place, right on the city's edge by the outer wall, where the whole area felt relaxed. Taki snapped his eyes up at the house map. "And you like the building map?" Then spotted this place even has a garden, a real backyard, perfect for training familiars and stuff. And to top it off, there's a well right on the property too. Taki thought he'd found the perfect place until Shelty warned him it was right outside the wall, where monsters could smash in any time. Even if a monster suddenly crashed into his world, Luke would take your thoughts, lock in, and wipe them out without breaking a sweat. So he swore he'd be fine because Luke was there. Then he asked to see the place right now, and after that, Shelty agreed to show off the property. And she steered him all the way there, right out beyond the walls. Taki finally got her first real look at the property. Then she spotted the backyard, and right there, a well sat waiting. That house looked absolutely insane. And just like that, you're hooked. The property looks perfect the moment you lay eyes on it. Meanwhile, Luke raced over, scanned the place, and locked in the proof confirming it for Taki. To him, it felt like the kind of perfect property you'd swear luck itself handpicked. Taki was itching to buy it, and Shelty jumped in and offered to show him around the inside of the house, right now. Tachi nodded then. The moment he stepped into the house, his jaw dropped at the insane design. And Shelton spilled the real reason this place was built so professionally. It used to be a restaurant, and the old owner was just as tame, using his familiar to haul in resources, and Taki instantly saw it as a huge win. Then Luke noticed the empty spot in the house and realized it was way too small for him. Luke pressed Taki, asking if someone like him so noble and proud could really be okay in a tiny place like this, and Taki answered that in his world, home means the place you choose to build your life. So he was certain Luke would come around and love it. Luke's news had everyone whispering. He'd gotten shy and started nagging that Taki was exhausting to be around. Taki just smirked, because in Luke's mind he was tsundere, meaning cold on the outside but soft at heart. And since Luke isn't really a person, that makes him just a son. With that out of the way, Shelty grabbed his attention and ushered him up to the second floor, where it opened into a cozy living space. Taki totally loved the room. It fit his bedroom perfectly. He said the furniture looked kinda outdated, but he was cool with it. Everything worked just fine for him. And then Shelty dropped the real bomb. Rent was $10,000 a month, and if Taki wanted to buy the place outright, he'd need to be at least a ranked E-Tamer or higher. Taki was totally cool with renting it for now, and he asked her to start prepping the documents. She snapped back happily that everything was set, so they head back to the guild and wrap up the last formalities. As they bolted out the door, Taki flicked one last glance back at the house. With it all coming together, it finally hit him. He was one step closer to finishing his cafe dream. Even with everything ahead of him, he still craved more, so much more he refused to let slip by. Meanwhile, Amelia, an adventurer guild receptionist, kept thinking because day after day, her job kept dumping fresh, shocking stories on her. She nearly couldn't believe it. Teshi had managed to get a Wolf King as his familiar, and that had to mean he was insanely talented. So she knew she had to rush and tell the guild master right away. Right when Taki arrived, she marched up and slammed her knuckles on the guild master's office door. But at that exact moment, she couldn't track her down anywhere in the office. Now that the guild master was back, she spilled every detail of what happened and grilled him. Where was she supposed to be when that high-ranking tamer paid a visit? Himiri couldn't believe it when he learned about a tamer who could tame a Wolf King, and she couldn't believe it. Having a tamer that powerful in their city felt unreal. Amelia nodded like she'd proven it, and when trouble hit, her Mary vanished. For good then Marie told her straight up she wasn't truly cut out to be a guildmaster, because every negotiation she touched turned into disaster. But Amelia knew it couldn't be that simple. Himari was born with crazy talent, mastered magic early, climbed all the way to guildmaster, and even earned the title of Adventurer of Wisdom. Still, Himari insisted she couldn't handle the admin grind, and Amelia, the receptionist, just stared like, what a total waste of a talent like that. Himari admitted it was pretty wild having a Wolf King as his familiar. Then he told me Amelia asked him to get that guy to team up with the Adventurers Guild, because even the monster materials he dropped off the other day were top-notch. Himari's face shifted, fast confusion mixed with frustration, like this whole situation had him unsettled and irritated. Then she basically slammed the whole thing shut right there, and when Amelia pressed her for answers, Himiri snapped back that she just didn't want to ask that guy to show up at the Adventurers Guild. If they keep hounding him, they'll push him into leading the city, so for now, they're just gonna have to let him stay put after. Amelia agreed with the guildmaster. She nodded once and rushed back to her work. Meanwhile, Emery wasn't really telling the truth the way she meant it back then. Ever since she fought a Wolf King once in her life, it stuck in her mind because that thing was brutal, and it still scares her to think about it. So when she hears some guy can tame it, she's got to believe they're giving him a job like hers, a one-of-a-kind mission. And she definitely didn't expect a tough Wolf King, someone like that, to stay this calm about it, which felt downright weird. She couldn't stop wondering if she'd ever run into him in the city. If it comes to that, she'd rather run into him as the fearless adventurer, not as the guildmaster, and as she stared out the window, she just knew they'd click. Now it's time to jump back to Taichi. This is his very first day in the new house, and he lit up with joy because they finally made it happen. He finally reached the spot where he'd soon build his dream cafe, and Luke couldn't stop saying it was all thanks to the monster she caught. Taki shot him a huge thank you for the massive help, and Luke told Kaki to stop messing with him the moment he wanted it. But secretly, he liked it until Taki got creepy and started sniffing him like he was prey. Taki said, "First things first, we get our house stuff handled," and Luke blurted, "So you're really buying new items?" Tachi shot back that sure he could buy it, then immediately said he wanted to test one of his crazy unique skills first. Creation, Luke didn't even know that existed. Like, who's supposed to find a power that convenient? Tachi didn't waste a second, he straight up decided to try it. And the moment he activated the unique skill, everything changed. Then a block slammed into his mind like a real 3D image hovering in his head, something he could reshape however he wanted. Che pictured a round table in the shop's center low to the ground, with legs shaped like a cat's paw. He picked a soft wood-based foundation with a gorgeous natural color. Then once everything was locked in, he finished the table, and it suddenly popped into view right before his eyes. Taki finally learned the secret behind this skill creation, and once he had it, anything he could dream up in his mind he could make real. Luke couldn't believe what he was seeing. Those insane skills were real, and then Taki wasted no time, jumping right into making more items, and somehow ended up crafting a comfy beanbag cushion for Luke to finally kick back and relax. He challenged Luke to give it a shot, and Luke hesitated, then carefully dropped his pawn onto the beanbag, and somehow he ended up loving it so much that he flopped onto the beanbag, convinced it was the softest, comfiest thing ever. Taki doubled down and churned out even more items: tables, chairs, and cushions. Then boom, shelves everywhere and all the other stuff stacked around the room, like clunky little separations and cat toys, plus all those soft toys too. He also shoved in a cat tower that stretches along the whole wall. And finally, he slammed a spiral staircase right onto the table in the middle. He wrapped up the house designs by throwing curtains on the windows, and just like that, he was finally done. The sun was already sliding toward the horizon, but he was so locked in that time slipped right past him. Then he snapped and yelled, "Luke, it's time to go." Luke wasn't ready to step into the leader's shoes, at least not fully. Taki said they had to do it this way, because if they didn't, Shelty would spiral with worry. Then he told everyone they'd head for the living room the next day and march right back to the Tamers Guild. Next day, Taichi showed up, wrapped up the living room fast, and Luke immediately felt it was way too cramped. But he forgave him the second he got the beanbag. Taki was over the moon, because Luke actually liked it. But right then, his face twisted into confusion as it all clicked. He remembered one of the most important pieces. He even said that this was supposed to be a cafe, yet there wasn't a single signboard hanging up like it was hiding in plain sight. Luke shrugged it off. Then Tassi leaned in and told him, "No, this is actually a big deal." So he whipped out creation magic and crafted the cafe Fluffy's signboard, this healing, relaxing haven, open from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Everything finally looked great. So Teaching next added a doorbell, because in that laid-back cafe, he didn't want the place running with the door open for hours on end. So the big question hit him. Could he launch a business without permission? To find out, he went straight for the Commerce Guild and asked Luke what he wanted to do, but Luke shot back that it sounded painfully boring, just going to sit through explanations. So he just flopped down on the beanbag and decided to knock out for a nap. Taki thought that was totally fine. So he tore off toward the city, ready to smash through his next mission. He swung by the Commerce Guild, and the receptionist greeted him with a bright smile, then demanded what he needed before Taki stepped forward and introduced himself. He showed up to get permission to open a cafe where folks could hang out with his familiars, and she couldn't wrap her head around it. Like, why would anyone want to interact with monsters? Which may make Taki feel a little let down, since nobody seems to get her whole idea of fluffiness. First, she told him that even if they were monsters, they were soft, fluffy, and just begging to be petted, and that felt so soothing. Humans actually needed it. The receptionist found the whole cafe fluffy concept fascinating, and since Taki's the tamer in charge, it was totally fine for him to own it. She told her that any monster hired out for work had to be registered with the Tamers Guild, and Pitchy totally understood why. Then she started grilling her with taxes, some rates changing wild, depending on whether the shop was private or commercial, and exactly where it sat. And Taki shot back that he was leasing a private shop out on the outskirts of town. She told him that if the shops were out in the outskirts, the tax would only be 5% of their total sales, and Taki practically couldn't believe how generous that sounded. Now she leaned in and demanded to know when he'd finally open the cafe. But just like that, Tachi's jaw dropped. No words could escape him. And then it hit him. He still had some prep to finish up, because the receptionist told him to come back once the date was finally decided. Right after that, Taki bolted straight to his quarters and burst out loud, "We've got a huge problem!" Luke leaned in and demanded to know what colossal trouble could possibly pry open the sleep of a lone Fenar. Taki snapped that they didn't have the fluffies to even crack open the cafe. Luke barely even phased like. It wasn't a big deal at all, while Taki was freaking out because this mattered way too much. Then Luke leaned in and demanded, "Why not just go out there and start taming monsters, since you're the tamer anyway?" So Taki marched straight to the Tamers Guild to corner Shelty and get the scoop on fluffy, friendly monsters. Shelty shot back that out in the southwest. Berry rabbits really existed like living prize targets for brand new adventurers. Taki thanked her for the info, sprinted to verify it immediately, and bolted off to find Berry Rabbit. Luke said those berry rabbits are lightning-fast monsters, so how in the world is he supposed to catch them? Luke offered to go grab them, but picturing Nate Taki shutting him down right on the spot kept the rabbits safe. Then he heard the grass rustle. Something was moving right out there. And when he glanced over, boom, there it was. A tiny, adorable, fluffy little monster rabbit. Taki couldn't help but swoon at how adorable this monster looked, and one glance told him it had to be the berry rabbit. As Taki stared, loving every second, Luke couldn't believe it. Berry rabbits were supposed to be ultra careful, yet the king marched straight up to Taichi, and Taichi immediately guessed why. His title was adored by every fluffy in the works. And just like that, everything clicked into place. Now he's got the berry rabbit fully tamed. After he finally tamed that berry rabbit, Taki couldn't stop thinking about calling it Marshmallow, because it was white, fluffy, and ridiculously cute. He wondered if his converse skills could help him talk to the berry rabbits. Then Luke snapped back that they're too dumb to hold a real conversation, but if Tachi stayed patient, they'd learn how to talk soon enough. Taki heard that and burst into joy, hugging Luke and praising his sharp mind while nuzzling that fluffy fur, and Luke snapped at him to quit acting like that so casually because. But just as he was about to finish, Taki cut in and blasted through his words because he was the long fennel. Luke burst out laughing, and Tachi smugly bragged that after hearing it a million times, he'd got the whole thing memorized. Then Taki spotted even more berry rabbits charging his way. So he took control of them, one at a time, taming them until they finally caved. He crouched and spotted berry rabbits in every wild color imaginable. Then he named the white one Monica and gently cared for the brown one. He figured this was the best place on Earth to be surrounded by fluffy little creatures. But Luke's worry hit hard, and he demanded to know how many of them he was really planning to tame. Tachi somehow managed to tame a whole bunch of them. Then he tore back into the city with a massive haul of berry rabbits. The guard at the gate went wide-eyed and demanded what was going on with that huge pile of berry rabbits. Taki just smirked and said, "I'm a tamer," and that these were his familiars. So he figured there'd be zero trouble when he flashed his guild card. Then the soldier only shrugged and said it was okay as long as they knew each other. But one thing left him scratching his head, how the number of tamed monsters could swing based on one skill level, and Teki never saw that question coming. The soldier's question made sense, but he couldn't blurt out that his skills were basically infinite, so he just shrugged and claimed he only tamed that many because those monsters were tiny and easy prey. The soldier clung to his lie with a shaky hesitation, and Taki shot back that it was just how things were, because in the end, they couldn't truly measure their level anyway. The soldier finally realized Tachi was right, and Tachi slipped right through the questions without breaking a sweat. Later, he still got dragged into questioning when he introduced his 10 berry rabbits to Shelty, and she froze in shock staring at him like, "Wait, why?" and bombarding him with questions. After the dust finally settled, Luke got to work and built every single berry rabbit. To stay away from his beanbag no matter what Taki noticed, the loop was trying to monopolize it. With one more soak, the berry rabbits claimed another toy too, and now they're all about playing, not just with those, but with anything else they can get their paws on. Luke grinned from ear to ear, and those berry rabbits were so adorable, they practically stole the whole moment. And now it all boiled down to the menu. Tea was practically a luxury around here, but he refused to settle for any cheap, nasty drinks. So, for this moment, he whipped out his next rare, one-of-a-kind skill by shopping. Then he realized he could summon the cat god to do the shopping for him. 5 items at a time. Taki's eyes widened when a pen and paper suddenly materialized right in front of them. So he raided the powdered sencha, her dusty old gray tea bags, instant coffee, cookies, and chocolates, and started writing down everything he needed. He tore through the list and couldn't shake the question. Did the vanished list really make it to the cat god? While he waited, Taki sketched a full cafe menu of creations, starting with green tea, coffee, and black tea, and he stalked the sweet side with cookies and chocolates. Right as he turned, the bag slammed onto the table behind him, with a bill for 2,800 shells hanging over him. He froze and wondered how he was even going to pay that. He pulled out the money, and then it vanished like smoke. Taki thanked the cat god for every single thing, because he knew one thing for sure. No matter what hit him, someone had his back. From this day on, Taki moved into the cafe, and Shelt was already on his way. He'd be showing up later to visit. Still, he had a brutal problem. There was no bathroom anywhere, and in this world, only the wealthy families got bathtubs. Taki then hauled Bath Luke in with his own hands. But Luke was fighting back, furious that Taki was doing it that way. So, Taki had to talk him down and convince him. And when he saw the berry rabbits actually soaking and loving every second of that bath, Taki noticed the berry rabbits were behaving themselves for once, especially compared to Luke. Luke blushed hard and slipped in quietly when he was finally bathed. No matter how much he hated it, he refused to let the newcomers outshine him. Taki. Down. After Luke finally got washed up, he started plotting a new bath idea, one with hot water on tap because winter was creeping in. Then it hit him. Shalty's words echoed in his head. Even if he was just renting, tweaking the place a little wouldn't be a problem. So with his creation skill, he built his own detached bathhouse from the ground up. Luke shot him a question about what this building was, and Taki just grinned and promised he'd absolutely love it, and burst into the bathhouse, and inside, the whole bathroom was lined up neat as a pin, and it's perfectly made just the way you want it. He couldn't help wondering what those taps even led to. But as long as they worked, he didn't care. Then Luke leaned in and asked what he planned to do with the hot water. Taichi shoved him into the moment. First, he introduced the bathtub, then made him try it right then and there once it was blazing hot. But before Luke could even try, the berry rabbits barreled in and Luke's temper instantly flared and launched in instantly, refusing to let them take the lead. Taki was adored by this whole sight. Luke let the hot water hit his skin, and instant calm washed over him like he'd never felt before. Luke swore that after bathing like that, even a noble Fentira like him shouldn't drop his standards, and that cold water just wouldn't feel right anymore. And Taki was honestly glad he liked it. Luke told Taki he was a total weirdo, and on Luke's say-so, Taki had to have a bath ready for him every single day, even though he never imagined Luke would get this fired up about it. And now, he slips into the bath too, finally taking a breather and letting his tense body unwind. Then Luke dropped straight into Taki's bath, convinced it wasn't fair that he'd been stuck with the whole bigger bath to himself. Luke had it way better. Here, he totally snapped himself out of the calm, and Taki figured he was loving every second of it. And once the bath was finished, Heichi flung the cafe doors open, told Marshmallow he'd be the leader of the berry rabbits, and demanded they do everything the right way. Marshmallow took the responsibility on with a grin, and Taki told everyone, "When the guests show up, you're free to play go wild, and just enjoy yourselves until then." 3 long hours crawled by, and not a single customer showed up, and the afternoon was creeping in fast. Taki didn't expect anyone to rush in. He hadn't really announced his cafe. He'd only posted a little notice around the place, so for now he could only pray the customer numbers would slowly rise. Suddenly it hit him this had to be what rental car owners feel, and right on cue, the doorbell screamed, and the first customers walked in at last. 3 wild adventures rolled into one unstoppable trio. Taki swung the door open and ushered them in, and the adventurer dude told them, "I spotted this place on our way back to town." So they just decided to grab a breather there. Right on the spot, the archer in their crew whipped out her arrow the moment she spotted berry rabbits and a wolf hanging around in that cafe. "Step up right now and stop her before she slips away." And then he lays it out. Those creatures are his familiars. She froze in shock, totally not expecting monsters lurking in a place like this. Taki immediately understood exactly how she felt, and she couldn't stop wondering how on earth familiars were even showing up in a cafe. Taki pointed out that this cafe was the fluffy place where monsters could be cute, fluffy, and somehow meet up with the customers for real interaction. He stepped up, introduced himself, and said, "I just opened today," which meant you were about to become his very first customers. The archer practically glowed at the news, then introduced herself with a confident smile. "I'm Nina the Hunter." And yeah, the other guy looked downright grisly. And last but not least, Aries showed up. Taki told them they could order and pay right here at the counter, but warned that there's a 1 drink per person limit at the moment. While they were waiting for orders, they got to jump in and talk to the monsters, and the seats were empty for them too. Nina snapped up the offer. Right as she placed the order, she leaned in and asked him what the difference was between the tea and the black tea. Taki grinned and said the tea usually meant green tea, his hometown's everyday drink, and it hit like instant relief. Gris and Nana decided to go for iced tea instead. Nina leaned in and asked what Aries ordered. Aries answered, "I'll have the black tea." And Nina chimed in that they'd grab chocolates and cookies too, and Tachi snapped them up with a grin, gladly taking the orders. He raked in 700 shells for every drink, charged 300 shells for the sweets too, and by the time it was all added up, the bill came to roughly 2,700 shells. He told them to make themselves comfy while they waited for the orders to hit, so Gris, Nana, and Aries grabbed seats across the room, and Nana couldn't help but stare at the berry rabbits in pure curiosity, because she used to chase them down. Seeing them like this hit her all at once, and suddenly, they were insanely cute. Gris said that once you ignore the fact that they're monsters, they're basically just little wild animals. Gris was just as curious about that massive wolf, but Luke's presence made his nerves snap with intimidation. Then Marshmallow charged straight toward Nana, and it left her in full-on panic, because she couldn't do a thing after all. She was guilty of aiming her bow at it earlier. She gave Marshmallow a quick, gentle pat, and right then, Grease was off playing with another berry rabbit, grinning as he held it, because most little critters bolt the moment they spot him. Nina laughed and said it was obvious Grease was a total softie at heart. Then Eerie snapped up, calling Gris out for overreacting, and Gris insisted it was totally fine because honestly, this was the kind of day he didn't get every day. Nina asked Aries if they could stop with the berry rabbits because she didn't want to play, but Aries was met with a quick denial. She said she just needed a cup of tea and a good rest. Soon, Tai-Chi burst in with the command of chocolates and cookies piled up beside 2 iced teas and a single black tea. Nana couldn't stop smiling. This order looked awesome, and Gris had never once tried a green drink before. And as they stepped up to test their orders, one by one, everything went live. Every single one of them stared in shock because the tea moved so damn smooth. And they matched the cookies perfectly, so insanely good that Grease started to doubt they were really being sold that cheap. Like the price had to be off by a whole digit, but Tachi insisted the numbers were 100% right. And when he saw their smiles, relief hit him hard. He promised them they could grab even more anytime. While Aries was sipping her black tea, the moment stretched on. A strange rabbit suddenly hopped up to Aries, and it totally caught her off guard. Aries whipped her head around, scanning the room to make sure nobody was clocking her. Then she tiptoed after the cute berry rabbit, soft as a whisper. She couldn't stop smiling at how gentle everything felt. And she was so shy, she'd never let herself be truly soft-hearted. Aries smirked and said she was only letting the berry rabbit borrow her lap because no one was watching. Taki watched the customers smile like the service had hit a perfect note. And it's wild to think they've never once brushed against the fluff of this world. So he figured they'd finally be able to kick back if meals were provided too. But he was freaking out because he wasn't much of a cook, and with how slammed he was all the time, he ended up living on convenience store meals. Techbeck reckoned he should give it a shot, something simple, and he even wondered if he could buy packaged food using his shopping skill. And just like that, he decided to scout the town, hunting for the perfect ingredients. Later, Taki spun around the market stalls and spotted a bunch of shops stacked high with fresh vegetables and all kinds of other goodies. He decided to cash in his shopping skills and go begging the cat gods for rice because this market had none to spare. Then the loop straight up called him out. He blurted that he was starving and told Taki to run to the food shop and grab him some meat skewers while they were still fresh off the grill, and Taki totally wanted in too since he was starving as well. So he grabbed meat for himself, and Luke told him to grab some extra for him too. Taki grabbed 1 meat stick for Luke too. Luke couldn't stop smiling. He said the food Taki cooked was way better than that, and he wanted Taki to know, and it hit him like a thunderclap, forcing him to finally see what he never even considered before. Luke leaned in and demanded Taki forge him another dragon steak. For now, he decided to grab the ingredients he needed and shove them into his magic bag. But out of nowhere, Luke sensed someone nearby and a person came up, grinning, saying it was awesome to see such a big dog. Turns out it was Himari. She stepped up, introduced herself, and leaned in asking Taki if that dog was her familiar. Taki clocked that the girl looked straight out of high school, but he still stepped up and properly introduced himself as Taki Tamer. And get this, the dog was really a wolf in disguise, and his familiar flu was off the charts. I keep getting asked if it's okay to pet him, but then Tachi turns to Luke and asks, "Are you okay?" Luke snapped that he wasn't some pet, even after that girl tried to call him dog, and Mary instantly knew it was a hard no. Tachi shot back, apologized, and said, "That's just how it is." And when it was time to Mary smile, turns out everything was fine. Because she picked up a few familiar sounds before, she knew that kind of thing could get messy, so she bit her tongue and refused to shove herself in. Tichi leaned in and asked if she wanted to cuddle a fluffy little creature, then promised she could swing by his cafe and pet the berry rabbits, because he was sure she'd fall in love playing with them too. Himri was stunned to learn it was Taki, apparently the same girl who ran that super fluffy cafe she'd heard about wording she got straight from receptionist Igmelia. She trailed behind Luke and spotted that cafe soft, cozy, and somehow more like a warm little home than a shop. Now, right as Himari burst into the cafe, she got totally lost in the cafe's calm, cozy vibe, like all the noise in the world just melted away. She was totally obsessed with playing with the berry rabbit. Taki could only hope Luke would be as friendly as those rabbits. After Himari counted the familiars, her jaw dropped. Taki really had 11 of them, and that blew her mind. Taki just laughed it off, and she told me this shop looks like it hasn't opened yet, so I asked, "Is it even okay for me to be here?" Taki just shrugged and said, "Yeah, it's fine." And since almost nobody wanted to pet monsters, he always welcomed the fluffy lovers anyway, even when time was running out. He clocked that it might have sounded weird, so he swore he wasn't bringing her here for any hidden reason. And Mary laughed and told him he was funny. And she swore it was totally fine because she was stronger than she looked. Then she yanked out her wand. Tichi clocked that she had to be a mage. Then Himiri stepped forward and introduced herself as an adventurer while secretly keeping her real identity as the guildmaster hidden. Then it hit him inviting her out of the blue probably meant she never got to eat breakfast, and she confirmed that was exactly what happened. When Taki tells her to wait while he grabs something quick for her, Himari just shrugs it off. She can wait, and she spends that time messing around with Barry's rabbits. Tachi slipped into the kitchen and used his shopping skill to grab the pasta ingredients, then whipped up some Italian dressing too, before unleashing creation magic to forge his own cafe-worthy tableware for the feast. Now, he boiled the pasta, heated the meat sauce with some hot water, then tossed the salad into a fancy dish, grinning because this place was turning into a proper cafe. After a while, he finally got the order out and told everyone she looked like she was having the time of her life. And Mary was totally obsessed with playing with those fluffy little berry rabbits. She couldn't help but stare at how ridiculously fluffy they were. With fur so gorgeous, it almost made her feel guilty for the way she kept smacking them with magic during missions. Taki burst in, handed her the order, and told her to dig in before it went cold while he prayed she'd love it, and Emery practically vibrated with excitement, ready to try it right away. The second she took that bite, her eyes lit up and she blurted, "That's so delicious." Alteki brushed it off like, "It's nothing special, just standard pasta." Himiri raved that the pasta was perfectly firm and the sauce was insanely rich. So Tachi blushed and accepted the compliment like a champ, then felt real relief when she admitted she loved it. And he even said he'd been thinking about adding this pasta to the menu. Hi Mary lit up that it'd be totally awesome, and the cutest tableware in the world was so high quality, it basically guaranteed everyone would love it. Tachi soaked in the praise, and just then a couple of berry rabbits hopped right up beside her foot. Mary, asked if they wanted some too, and Taki snapped, stopping me cold and warning me to never feed them. He showed up with food for the berry rabbits, and they stared at him with those ridiculously cute eyes, which Taki guarded with something like obsession so special it felt downright unfair. Mary leaned in and asked him, "Tell me, do those berry rabbits chow down on strawberries for breakfast?" He nodded right back, then swung around and started feeding the rabbits, turning those little feedings for berry into the main event, while I stared at him. Then, without warning, the berry rabbits bolted straight for the food, and they chomped down so hard, totally locked in on every bite. The berry rabbits were so adorable as they munched away that he couldn't tear his eyes off them. Taki even said he could watch them like this forever. And right in that breath of calm, Emir suddenly snapped to it somehow. Those berry rabbits had her completely hooked. She stared at the berry rabbits, completely hooked, and that's when she finally realized just how ridiculously amazing their fluffiness was. Taki totally understood her feelings, because he'd been there too, right at the cat cafes, where he was always overworking, yet somehow still pushed himself to feed those adorable cats he couldn't stop smiling at. After they stuffed themselves, the berry rabbits finally curled up to rest while Himari swore she'd come back as a customer next time. Himari's words lit him up, and he grinned as he told her she could drop by any time so they could bask in all that soft, fluffy goodness. Then she asked how much she owed, and Taki shrugged, telling her the feedback was payment enough. I married Smild, and the moment trouble hit, I vowed to rush in and help because she was a fearless adventurer. Taki felt way more at ease and promised, "Next time, I'll ask for help for sure." Then I made good on it and headed off on my way. "Promise you'll take care of yourself." Now, it yanks you right back to work. First, he rewired the menu and slammed in a pasta set smothered in meat sauce. Next, he raided the supplies to restock everything he needed for the next round of cooking. Then Luke showed up and begged Taki to whip up a dragon steak for him. Taki's heart swelled with awe when Luke asked for it with that shy little face. But Luke didn't like being talked down to, so he snapped at Techi to stop insulting him, and Techi got it because he'd already seen Himari digging into pasta. And then Mary's mind snapped. What if Luke felt lonely, trapped in her focus while she kept staring only at him? After that, Cafe Fluffy finally got a few quiet days, customers rolled in, smiles on their faces, and the chaos stayed gone for once. Among them, a merchant became a regular at his spot, and the one who always grabbed his attention was Monica, the whiteberry rabbit, so he ordered a green tea and a plate of pasta. Grinning like he just struck gold, he kicked back in pure joy the moment he laid eyes on Monica, and delivering notice. Most of the berry rabbits were crammed around the merchant, something you almost never saw. She delivered the order and thanked the merchant for holding on. Then the merchant admitted he had no idea why rabbits kept swarming around him. Ticklish terror hit him so hard he swore he'd die a sacred death any second. And right then, Teaching noticed something, and he demanded to know if the merchant had anything tucked in that chest pocket. Then the merchant grinned and said he'd actually got prototype cookies tucked right in there. Then, bam! The berry rabbits proved cookies were real and leapt at him like they'd been waiting all along. The merchant's eyes went wide and he nearly stumbled back in shock. Taki snapped that it went against policy to feed the fluff with outside food, and the merchant quickly bowed and apologized, swearing it wasn't done on purpose. That merchant felt way too happy after those berry rabbits laid into him. And to stop everything from spiraling, he snatched every last cookie and ate them all himself, leaving the berry rabbits trapped on the spot, utterly frozen in fear. Tachi leaned in and asked them, "Are you seriously that hungry?" So he figured he'd better whip up some snacks for them. Then he'd keep an eye out for the right time. He watched that poor merchant's tragedy unfold. Every last rabbit bolted from his side, and it broke his heart. Soon after, Tachi slammed the shop shut and talked with Luke about how he could upgrade things for him and the berry rabbits. Luke genuinely loved pushing to make things better for them, but he made it crystal clear that what mattered most was what they ate and the environment where they trained. And honestly, Luke just has to gush about the beanbag being the best. Tachi absolutely loved that adorable little moment. Then he stared at berry rabbits, wondering if he should haul them outside for a run and let them burn off some energy. But the berry rabbit started hopping all over the place, like it was shouting, "We're totally okay in here." Taki asked Luke to run wild in the backyard, but Luke shot it down. He wouldn't be happy with some tiny yard. He'd way rather go hunting sometimes instead, as he pictured exactly what that mentality would feel like in his bone. Tachi nodded and promised Luke their time starting right then, and for good. And just like that, Luke crashed into sleep to gear up for a workout later, while Taki insisted the real mission first was to hunt down food. He dove right in, whipping up something juicy with strawberries and carrots. Then he suddenly realized he was running out of ingredients. And right there, among the rest, he spotted a moonflower. And he decided to rush to the Tamers Guild and get answers. So he finally rolled up to the guild, and Shelty greeted him with pure worry, freaking out that he hadn't been showing up much lately. She clocked it instantly. Tacky hadn't brought a single one of his tamed monsters today, and Tacky proved her point. Luke was standing there, right behind him. But Shelty couldn't stop herself from asking about berry rabbits, because when Tacky showed up with 10 of him all at once, she was completely thrown. Tacky wasted no time and grilled her for moonflowers, and then Shelty flipped open a book to show him exactly what a moonflower looked like. It could only be collected at midnight when every last moonbeam was blazing in the sky. Tachi's worries shot up the moment she heard that. She said you could buy them at magic shops and the closest one was only a 5-minute walk from here. So Tachi nearly forgot he wasn't in his own world anymore, because of course this place had magic stores. Shelty leaned in and asked if he was planning to cook up something with them, because that rare ingredient wasn't something tamers or cafes ever got their hands on. Tacky said he wanted to whip up some snacks for his family, and that snapped her back to the fact that Tacky's actually got real cooking skills. Jealousy sparked in her chest when she saw moonflowers being chopped up for ingredients. After thanking Shelty for the help, Tacky sprinted off to the magic stores. Tacky sprinted to the magic store in no time and spotted this huge store that screamed, "Only nobles are welcome here." He wasn't sure they'd let him in with Luke, but Luke hated the thought of being stuck outside the store. Then Himari burst in out of nowhere and greeted Tacky with a loud, excited hello. She shot him a question: what on earth was he doing here at the magic store? Then Tassi spilled everything to her, laying out the whole situation. Himari told her she could just wait right here with Luke, and he knew that'd help, but he didn't want to crowd her or be a burden. "I'm dead sure it'll be okay. He was nice to her the other day, so now she's ready to step in and help him herself. I'll crew you up right there on that offer." But Luke's rage was blazing so hard you could practically feel it in the air. Tachi begged him to stay here just for a little while, and promised him an even bigger beanbag as the ultimate reward. Luke bought into it and was sure that if it was that way, it simply couldn't be held like that. He sprinted off, promising he'd be back fast, and Himiri told him to slow down and take his time there. Right when Taki stepped into the magic store, he stared at shelves packed with potion after potion and magical gear like the whole place was buzzing with activity and people. But he forced himself to calm down so Luke and Himari didn't have to keep waiting. He scanned the market, eyeing a whole lineup of magic grasses priced at about 1,000 shells each. Then they finally tracked down the moonflower. After all that searching, they found it. The moonflower. For just 10,000 shells per bundle. Hay told himself it wasn't even that bad, and he couldn't stop wondering how many cookies he could churn out from just one flower. He stormed out of the magic shop the second he grabbed his stuff, and then he locked eyes with the intimidating Luke. Face-to-face terror hit him like a wave. He rushed to apologize for keeping her waiting, then leaned in and asked if she was really okay. "I told you it was all fine because Luke's such a good boy," but the moment they piled on praise, Luke hated it. Alright, it was time for Taki to head home, so Himari jumped in too, and they watched him whip up the treats. Later, at Disberry House, Taki dumped every last ingredient onto the table, and whips out their cooking skills to whip up the treats. In the end, he threw himself into baking mini cookies and stuffed them into tiny bags. He tallied everything to track their total production cost and exact count. He grinned because they'd whipped up 70 bags of cookies with that exact pile of ingredients. So now he's got to slap on 40 to 50 shells per bag just to claw back the cost. He told her he was about to give cookies to berry rabbits, and she shot up like fireworks. She couldn't wait to be the one to deliver them. But the moment she shoved that cookie away, she grabbed a cookie and ate it all by herself. Taki couldn't help but wonder why she did it, because I'm the reason she couldn't resist herself. And those cookies were so ridiculously good, I couldn't stop eating them. Taki can't stop himself. He has to give it a shot too, and drive the berry rabbits into a full sprint to grab a taste too. I patted them once, then I told her, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you hand them out for sure." Then Taki Herb Luke came charging after him, sniffing out the trail like a hunter on the hunt, and begged Tachi to save him some cookies, because he forgot all about mixing snacks for Luke. As Himiri asked Luke if he wanted some too, Luke nodded, clearly flustered, and said, "For now, I'll roll with cookies, because that's what my subordinates are scarfing down anyway." Taki could tell Luke was just barely holding it together. Maybe he was too shy to deal with people like Himari, because he'd been alone for so long. Taki flashed a smile, promised he'd hand Luke the cookies himself, and told her to deal with the berry rabbits. Taki leaned in and bragged that the cookies were made from carrots, strawberries, and moonflower. Then Luke went, "Okay, But where's the meat? But the moment he bit into those cookies, his ears shot up like he just heard a secret melody. And Luke straight up admitted those cookies weren't half bad, so Taki breathed easier, grinning because he finally liked the taste. Then Luke begged for more cookies, and Tachi shot back that stacking too many would make him sick. Luke brushed it off. "It's fine if I exercise," he said, leaning on his noble fencer status like that settled everything so. Taki had no choice but to give in. But Luke was so desperate for a taste of what Taki was hiding that he pressed his mouth over Taki's hand. Meanwhile, Hemira was hustling to fetch fresh cookies for the berry rabbits, and she got hit so hard by the sweet, adorable sight that she couldn't even process it. And the moment she handed them one cookie, every single berry rabbit would claw their way into a ruthless brawl just to be the first one to grab the cookie. All the other Gary rabbits would stare at her, like they couldn't wait for her next move, and Hamiri couldn't stop herself. Those adorable eyes stared at her like she was the only thing in the world. Taki and Himiri had a blast tossing cookies to the fluffies. And later on, after all that, the teaching update finally flipped the menu to the new version. Pay 300 shells per bag to add those bunny cookies. The very next day, Aries, Grizz, and Anina's adventure crew rolled into a cozy cafe. Then Grizz's eyes snapped to a brand new menu, and right there are bunny cookies. Taki grinned and told him they'd finally unlocked a way to feed the berry rabbits cookies too. So Grizz and Nina rushed in and grabbed a single bag to share, while Aries shrugged and stuck with just black tea for the moment. When Nina urged her to try it too, Eri shook her head and said she was totally fine. Even though Eri insists otherwise, Manatee still shows up every single time right there with her, tagging along when they hit the cafe. Before berry rabbits could smash into him with full force, Taki clued Grizz in ahead of time because it was all over those cookies. But he had no idea those adorable berry rabbits could swarm him with ruthless speed just like that in the blink of an eye. Manatee's Tim's time feeding them was over way too fast, like the moment instantly vanished. She'll smile as she hands out one cookie at a time. Aries stared at them as they fed the berry rabbits. A few days later, Taki spotted Aries right at the cafe showing up completely on her own. She said she just wanted to slow down and savor a peaceful tea time. And she snapped that she had no other motive at all. No tricks, no secret agenda, just wanting to pet the rabbits. With her usual black tea and chocolates, and not a single other customer in sight, she finally let her guard down. She dove into the book and got lost in every page, snatching quick glances at the berry rabbit. And Sint marched in with her order, ready to crush you. She snatched the chocolate and devoured it in one sweet rush. And she took a sip of her usual black tea, smiling like nothing could shake her. After that, she grilled Taki out of pure curiosity. Where did he get that black tea? Because the aroma was absolutely unreal. Teki threw out a quick apology, then admitted he snagged it through a buddy's contact. Aries realized he couldn't say it out loud, so she hurriedly apologized for bothering him and then slipped away to get back to her tea. Then Tachi snatched a brown berry rabbit from the ground and set her on Aries' lap, shocking her so bad she snapped that she only came here to read. Taki told her she was fine, then leaned in and named the brownberry rabbit Chalco. Perry spotted her name and instantly thought of the exact chocolates she's obsessed with. And she flashed a quiet, clueless smile like she was actually savoring every second of it. Taichi clocked it and quietly gave her the privacy she needed. Aries clocked it too. Teki probably noticed she hates it when people stare at her. She gave Chaco a quick, gentle pat and started wondering if everyone else feels this insane rush too. Then Chaco suddenly licked her finger, and she jerked back in pure shock. She figured it had to be the chocolatey smell, since she'd been nibbling earlier, so next time, she'd try slipping in a few cookies instead. Then Taki shut the store down the moment it was time, and he couldn't stop grinning because the new treats he cooked absolutely crushed it with everyone who tried them. Luke reminded him it was time to work out, and Taki immediately caved, agreeing to go with him. But only moments later, regret hit him like a punch to the gut, because Luke was flying so fast he couldn't keep up. Luke shot back that he'd promised to do it the right way, and right then Taki realized it wasn't going to be some mild little job. It was about to get brutally intense, even though he could tell Luke was on top of the world right now. So he's not going to slow down, not for a second. And that's when Luke locks eyes on a dragon straight ahead of them. And he made it crystal clear he wanted Dragon's take back, no questions asked. Taki's eyes went wide when she realized that dragon was absolutely enormous. Luke turned to him and demanded, Are you seriously about to kill that dragon? And Luke just shrugged, grinning. It looks tasty, so why not? And he ordered Taki to hold tight while he went in to slay the dragon. Luke snapped into hunting mode and carved a moonlit wind slash straight toward the dragon's neck. Taki got so slammed by that technique's name that his focus completely vanished, that he missed the moment when the loop wiped out the dragon with effortless beheadings. Taki realized, again man, he was insanely lucky to be teamed up with Luke. Luke rushed up to Taki and demanded he whip up a dragon steak. Get ready because we're about to take that dragon steak straight to the table. Luke dug into the delicious meat, loving every bite because he genuinely enjoyed it. Then he leaned toward Luke and asked, bluntly, if it was really okay for humans to chow down on dragon meat too. Taki just shrugged and said, yeah, that's fine. And then he dropped the truth. The dragon meat was top tier, an insanely high-quality ingredient for humans. Teach, you tried some in that case. And the second he takes a bite, his eyes light up like he's tasting pure luxury. He went, Luke's even stronger than I ever imagined. And that hit him like pure relief, because Luke's been his very first partner in this world, and he's even staying with him right now at the coffin. Luke spun around with a shy, bashful grin, and he swore he'd only claim that cafe as his turf because the beanbag was ridiculously good. Pechi clocked Luke's total panic just from how his tail wouldn't stop wagging. After that, they dug into steak together and didn't stop for a while. Little did they know that, soon enough, a terrifying beast would come crashing into their lives. It all kicked off when Himari trudged into the cafe one day, so exhausted her eyes could barely stay open. Taki swooped in and took her order cookies with a steaming cup of black tea. But the moment he delivered he saw him already married, then collapse hit him hard, and sleep claimed him from pure exhaustion. He used his creation magic to whip up a blanket, covering him and giving her the freedom to sleep as long as she wanted. She jolted awake out of nowhere. He flashed her a warm smile and welcomed her like everything just clicked into place. Himari burst out thanking him for letting her finally catch some sleep. And when she asked him how long she'd been sleeping, he shrugged and said, about 2 hours, give or take. I flinched hard because she only meant to take a quick break, but somehow she just crashed and slept. Bring your gaffer a box of chocolate to melt that pretension. After that, she bolted out of there in a hurry, and Taki guessed she had a rough job to handle. After hours had gone by, the adventurers who came back again and again showed up by evening and pounded on the question, Tashi, are you shutting down? Taki warned them they still had 30 minutes before closing. Then, as soon as that clock started ticking, they darted into the games with berry rabbits. Taki then leaned in and asked, so what's going on with the adventures? Because Makani looked more drained than ever, Grizz and Ninus couldn't hide his worry. They told Key some monstrous thing over 3 meters tall had just popped up in the nearby forest. Taki didn't give it a second thought because, yeah, he'd already run into a fender before. But then Gris and Nina shoved the truth at him in a panic Cerberus. Showing up was a total nightmare, and they even told a wild tale. The beast once wrecked an entire city just by sneezing, turning it into a disaster-level monster. Taki's stomach dropped the moment he understood the danger. What if that monster tore into the city next? Now he finally gets just how deadly this thing really is. She told him Sirs didn't look like it was budging from the ruins. Then the panic hit. She just spilled confidential info, and she demanded he keep it secret. Taki snapped back that you can't go casually blabbering top-secret details like that. She explained why the Adventurers Guild had to lock this info down. One leak could spark mass panic and even slither into neighboring countries. And now Taki finally understood why Himeji looked so drained. Gris told them they never actually saw the Cerberus, yet they could feel its crushing pressure, and that was the reason they wouldn't be able to beat it. Even so, they can't just sit back and do nothing right now. The guild is secretly lining up a strike force of top-tier ventures, and they'll strike within the next few days. Then Gris snapped to attention time had already run out for them. But Nana dug in, refusing to go yet because the moment she was tired, she was finally ready to rest. So Tachi didn't let them leave. He invited them to stay for dinner because he wanted to thank adventurers like you, so guys like him could finally live in peace. Grizz and his crew bowed their heads, loving every bit of Taki's generosity, and they totally took the extra time to pet even more bunny rabbits before the moment slipped away. Nine lobbed it through A. Then Monica snatched the ball back and brought it home. While Gris cuddled one of the berry rabbits perched on his lap, He and everyone else kept getting way too attached to these little critters, because even if they look cute, they're still monsters. And right then, Tachi shot over with dinner. And they laid out dragon steak, corn potato soup, fresh salad, and warm fluffy bread for everyone. The second Luke caught the scent of dragon meat, he shot up like he'd been hit with lightning. And he grabbed his portion of dinner and dug right in, while Luke sat there, shocked at the sight of Luke getting fed for the first time right in front of them. And with that out of the way, he and the others couldn't resist digging into that ridiculously fancy-looking steak. They fired the question at him. What kind of meat was that? But Tachi couldn't just blurt out, "It's dragon." They took a bite of the meat and froze like, "Wait, we've never tasted a steak this good." Even the bread felt unreal, so soft it practically melted. Taki grinned, seeing they actually loved the dinner, and once the tea was finished, they dipped out right after. Luke leaned in and asked Taui straight up if they were leaving, and when Taui nodded confirming, he told Techi, "Let's go work out." But Techi shot back, worried, urging him to stay inside and skip going out. Because Cerberus was right on their heels, Luke snapped at Taki for even thinking he could take him. So he grabbed Tashi and dragged him outside immediately, then dared him to watch his strength firsthand. Taki snapped at Luke, asking if he was truly sure. Then Luke grinned and said Cerberus would be a total breeze for him. Later on, Luke suddenly felt Cerberus closing in. He told Tasia they were heading the right way, and Tasia demanded to know how he could be so sure. Luke insisted he was strong enough to feel Cerberus' presence the moment it was near. Teaching warned that adventurers could be lurking out there, so Luke had to play it safe, and he finally understood what Taichi meant. He slammed Taki with a red hit, and he jabbed his finger toward the closest adventurer, like it was calling his name. Luke didn't care one bit whether the adventurers here spotted him going toe-to-toe with Cerberus, so he charged right in and roared like a dare, daring Cerberus to show itself and come after him. And yep, just like he figured, it all played out exactly that way. Then the server finally showed up. And just like in the legends, it had 3 heads staring back at everyone. The Cerberus roared with pure fury, matching every scary rumor people had whispered. And Taki was certain this was even more terrifying than that dragon from before. Lu didn't hesitate for a second. He strode right up and confronted Cerberus with zero fear. Taichi watched as the adventurers rushed to report what happened to the guild right away. Then the servers hurled magic spheres again and launched attack loop, so they dodged it by springing into the air and flipping out of the loop, and slashed at Cerberus with moonlit claws. It launched the Cerberus into the air. But even so, it was nowhere near defeated. Taki's stomach dropped for Luke because Cerberus felt way stronger than anyone expected, and they wondered, if they managed to defeat it, what would happen next, too, because he didn't think they could even eat it, until another look proved him wrong. When Teaching spotted that surprising creature's fur, he gasped because it looked absurdly fluffy. So he thrust his hand forward, and in the blink of an eye, he snapped it into submission. Luke seethed as Tachi stepped in front of him. Tachi threw an apology into the air and admitted he couldn't help what happened. Then, out of nowhere, Cerberus's bark tore through the air. Now those Masachuras shrank into a cute 3-headed puppy, and the 3 heads begged Tichi, "Master, catch us." Sachi didn't just catch the Cerberus, he crushed way more than that. And somehow, he could finally make out what it was saying, which means he finally tamed it for good. Taki felt this soft, weightless bliss creeping through him like he was about to float straight up to the heavens. Then, the 3 heads of Cerberus snapped at him, demanding he name each one of them. Then Taki whipped around and began naming each one, starting from the far left. The left one just ends up being Null. The middle one is P.O., and the one on the right labeled Chloro. Taki scooped them up above and couldn't stop smiling, loving how way smaller and fluffier they'd become than they were before. Pino swore this form felt way better because it let them stay closer to Taki, but Taki immediately spotted the injuries. First, he slammed them with healing magic, and the wounds started to mend right away. That only gave his tamed monsters the edge. The surgeon practically glowed after being healed, and they even told Taki he was cool. But Luke couldn't shake the sting of it, because the damage he caused got fixed way too fast. Taki finally felt the pain lift, and Cerberus was breathing easier too. Teki pulled him into a tight hug because he couldn't resist how cute it felt. Then Luke snapped, telling him they had to move now because the adventurers from before could wake up any second, and Taki still remembered how they'd blacked out during that fight. So he hauled those wild adventurers somewhere safe first. Then Taki snapped into panic and couldn't stop thinking what on earth was he supposed to do now with Cerberus. Next morning, Yu jolted awake. and spotted Cerberus dead asleep right beside him. He remembered hauling them back home with him earlier. As he swept his eyes around the room, Luke came into view, and tons of rabbits were sleeping all around on top of their bags. Luke couldn't help but feel touched. So many Flux were already curled up fast asleep that early in the morning, and the second he woke up, he had a million questions for Cerberus, like why it all started at those ruins. He still remembers when the Cerberus promised they'd never be lonely again. So yeah, it had to be brutal for them to survive all that time stuck by themselves. He gave Cerberus a quick pat, then Bam noticed one of them snapped awake. He shot an apology, just so he didn't wake the guy up. Then the teachers caught it only one head. Noel had finally woken up. Noel leaned in and told him the wild truth. They share just one body, but every head carries its own separate consciousness. Taki shot Noel a question. Is it cool if I brought them here? And Noel just waved it off. Yeah, you're good. They kept vanishing into hiding because humans hunted them wherever they slipped, and he insisted those ruins were their latest safe spot, which might actually bring you some long-awaited relief to hear. He stepped in and tamed them, and that's exactly how he saved the day for them. Right beside him, Chloro also jolted awake and burst out that he felt way happier here, and he always dreamed of finding real, kind, humans like Taki. Taki felt their hearts sink from everything they'd been forced to endure. After he hauled them out, he finally breathed a sigh of relief because he got to meet Cerberus. He sprang out of bed, swore he'd protect them with everything he had, and told Cerberus to wait while he carried their breakfast over. After a while, he burst into the cafe and flung the door open. And the very first visitors were Grizz and his crew, wiped out from being dragged in for an emergency call this morning. They made a quick stop just to see the Fluffies and Taki. And Taki couldn't help but spot the same pattern from his old days back. He told Grizz and the others, "Since you're regulars, I'll hook you up free bunny cookies for the berry rabbits." And the moment they heard it, their tired faces perked up, and they cheered like a switch flipped. And Taki basically dropped the bombshell. Starting today, they'd finally gained a new family member. Grizz was jumping with excitement, right up until Taki shouted, "Pino! Chloro! Noel!" The adventurers froze, so shocked they couldn't even get words out. They hurried in and sized up the three-headed dog, comparing it in seconds to the exact servers they'd been hunting, though this place made it insanely hard to spot it clearly. But they still heard the terrifying reports. Cerberus vanished from the ruins out of nowhere, and people swore it even battled a huge, wolf-like monster. Grizz told us Guild's research points to the Cerberus getting killed, so that means this dog has to be one of its kids. Harry finally realized Cerberus had sacrificed his own life to shield his child, and everyone else jumped in, agreeing with her, because it just had to have gone down exactly like that. And Grizz finally admitted that some kind of training must have kicked in back then, because it ended up teaching him how to handle that Cerberus without either of them realizing it was a pup. Nina said something weird was going on. Taki wasn't just a mystery to her. He was packed with all these familiar hints that made no sense. But in the end, they realized it's all good teaching managed to tame it, and there was nothing else they could do. Taki leaned in and asked if their talk was done, and they nodded, saying yes. Taichi hauled in the food for Luke, Cerberus, and the rest of the crew. While the adventurers took care of the berry rabbits, he fed Luke and Cerberus himself. And just like that, with one more member joining the family, Cafe Fluffy stayed calm and cozy, peaceful, like it always is. Meanwhile, Guildmaster Henmary prowled the forest, scanning for where Cerberus had vanished, while other adventurers pressed her, insisting Cerberus might have been killed. She refused to believe it could vanish like that, because she was desperate to see it for herself. But now it was time to head back, so Henmary cranked the plan into gear and took a detour on the way. As she charged toward her destination, she stumbled onto a pack of orcs. Then every one of them clocked her the second she appeared, and they were clearly hostile, ready to strike the moment an opening showed up. Henmary had zero time to waste. She figured the only job Kahilna had was to feed the berry rabbits. So she fired off her cyclone magic in a blink to pulverize those orcs in an instant and get out of here fast. After wiping them out, she scattered salt and wished those monsters were just as cute as the berry rabbits. Now she popped back out again on her way to the cafe, fluff swishing with every step, and the moment she arrived, she met Taki with a warm greeting. Taki practically said she must have been swamped, like she could already tell. She shot back that she'd already handled her work, so now she was here to have fun with the berry rabbits. She's completely blindsided by a Cerberus right here in Cafe Fluffy. Seeing her stuck there, stone still, Tachi snapped. "What's wrong?" He told her all about the new kids in the cafe. Fluffy, Pino, and Chloro Nolant prayed she'd click with them, but she was so stunned she couldn't even get a word out. She leaned in and asked what she wanted to drink, and she ordered a black tea. While Taki dashed off to grab the order, Himiri swore the only three-headed, one-body monster in sight had to be a Cerberus. So yeah, no matter how you slice it, a surgeon had now shown up at the cafe, and she was seriously excited to finally meet him. She plopped down with nerves in her eyes like she was bracing for impact, and reached out to run his fingers through the Cerberus's fur. She couldn't look away from Cerberus's fluffy fur. She just kept staring at him, totally stunned. She remembered hearing that some monsters could shrink or grow once they were tamed, and she was itching to see one with her own eyes. And yeah, there's no way a Cerberus belongs in the same league as a berry rabbit, so an ordinary tamer could never handle a disaster-grade monster, which means Taki might be one of the best tamers in this whole world. She kept asking herself who Taki really was, but the truth was out of reach. She caught him staring right back at her from that spot, and then just turned around to face Luke. He slid the black tea to him, eerie. She refused to let the cafe's charm vanish, so she steeled herself using her authority as the guildmaster to back Taki up the moment trouble hit, quietly helping him from the shadows. Next day, right as the cafe was shutting down, Luke and the crew yanked Taki awake for a meal. While Tachi got swept up daydreaming about being popular with the Fluffies, Luke snapped with rage, shoved all his weight onto Taki, and forced him to spring up immediately. After he served the meals, Taki stared off, wondering what he could do today. Then it hit him. It had been ages since he first arrived in this world, and there were still so many things he didn't know. So he decided to swing by the Tamers Guild today. Right after he rode into the Tamers Guild, Shalti greeted him the same way she always did. Then Taki admitted he wanted to dig deeper into Tamers, so he showed up today while Sheltai stared in disbelief that he barely knew anything about Tamers, even with that abnormal pile of familiars, and Taki just shrugged and blamed it on growing up in the countryside. So she handed him a monster like it was right there in the cyclopedia, and it even laid out where all those monsters make their lairs. Taki swept his gaze across the habitats of the monsters he owned, while Cerner and Lu had absolutely zero clue about anything. Taki was mainly obsessed with fluffy monsters, and just like that, his eyes locked onto something he would not look away from. His face slammed into the book when he spots a cat-type monster lurking inside. Shelty told him it was a forest cat, and Taki's curiosity instantly lit up as he leaned in to hear every detail. So she told him, "You'll have to cross into the next country and hunt through the forest to find that forest cat." But if he rode in a carriage, the trip would drag on for about a month. Taki figured if he scribbled on Luke, he'd reach his goal way faster than waiting a whole month. And when she caught that hooked, interested look on his face, she said, "Trust me, if a forest cat hops into Tachi's cafe, it'll look absolutely adorable." She thrust a map into his hands. Right after that, Tasi bolted straight home to hammer out the details with Luke. He shouted for Luke and yanked him awake from his sleep. Luke snapped, asking what could possibly matter more than his cozy sleep then. Tachi smirked and said he was itching to head to the neighboring country. Luke remembered the neighboring country was the Aziran Kingdom and shot Taki a question. "Why do you want to go there?" Taki grinned and said he wanted to tame the forest cat that prowls through the Aziran Kingdom woods. Cerberus burst with excitement when he heard that his friends were about to grow in number. Taki told Luke that regular carriages would take about a month to get there, and Luke snapped back that horse-driven carriages. No one could keep up with the speed of a noble Fenrir like him, so he'll sprint over there and make it happen in an instant. He even offered to carry Taki on his back, but Taki hesitated hard because that pre-Yist ride still haunted him. Luke snapped, asking what that look meant, and Taki grinned back that he was just bursting with joy because Luke finally agreed to take him there. Sir Urus blurted out that he wanted to go with them too. Luke told him to stay out of it, while Taki let him know he could hop on its back too. And they should trust Luke, because he already beat it once before, plus the servers warned it'd be lonely if he stayed stuck at home. Then Luke stepped right up to Cerberus and told him he wanted them to guard the berry rabbits right here, because the only chance he had was to ask them before Luke and he disappeared. The second the server got the call, it lit up, tail wagging like crazy because it finally got to be relied on. Taki couldn't stop himself from petting that fluffy wagging tail, and it felt like being handled, like that touch was dragging fire across his skin. Taki loved it when that fluffy tail whipped around his hands and smacked his cheek like it was all his favorite attention. So Luke Yil figured it out fast. He'd better stay clear of Taki and keep a real eye on the house. Taki's last worry now came down to food because Cerberus can't cook for everyone, and that means he may have to hire someone on the spot for a short-term part-time gig. He stormed into the Commerce Guild and demanded to know the rules for boosting his employee count. The receptionist just shrugged and said there was nothing unusual at all, and he could either beg the guild to step in and settle it for him, or strike out on his own and recruit people himself. She figured he should go recruit someone personally, so the hired fighter wouldn't start manhandling the monsters. Then Himari Saute sprang into action and greeted him instantly. Taki was genuinely happy their paths crossed, and when he told her he was thinking about hiring short-term employees, the whole idea sounded like it could work out. The moment Himari heard it, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed that chance fast, because she'd be with the berry rabbits all the time. Tichi was totally thrown off by how into it she was. Then she blurted, voice shaking, "Am I not good enough?" And Lee shot back that if she kept at this, she might end up having a tough time as a kid. She told him the reason didn't matter, but Tachi wouldn't let it go. He was convinced it mattered. Then he spotted another young girl, just like Himari, running a flower shop like it was her whole world. Himari told him, "Look, it's not weird at all people your age can absolutely run a shop on their own. And you go think about it, she's sure Taki's place won't be too much work, because in her mind, the only real trouble Luke ever caused was the fact that he was the one who kept tagging along with Taki. So you told her to tail him, and you promised you'd break down the whole cafe job turns. Out I'm Marie, and I happily followed Luke straight to the cafe, where the berry rabbits and Cerberus tore into a warm welcome for him. Himari was practically vibrating with excitement, dreaming of the day she'd become an employee and finally get to live this moment too. Then Taki told her over tea that he was heading out to snag a new fluffy and warned her it'll take him around 25 days before he comes back. And Mary demanded to know how he planned to tame it. He shot back that he'd tame a forest cat from the neighboring country, and I totally loved the idea because that cat was insanely fluffy. But Himari fired back, asking if this meant her short-term job would last just 25 days, while Teki assumed it was way too much for her, only for Himari to be shocked in a totally different way, because he'd somehow managed to reach the Asarum Kingdom in only 25 days. She leaned in and told him she'd once beaten a forest cat before, but she never laid a hand on its fur, and now she was buzzing to do it for real. Now, Taki leaned in and told her he'd bail as soon as he married. Then he'd learn the job. Emery shot back that she was a free agent right now, so he could finally count on her. So he tells her, "All right then, I'll teach you the job and stay with you until it's done." And during that stretch, he even brings up her salary too. He told her exactly what hours she'd work and how much she'd earn on an hourly basis, 10,000 shells a day. Then Chimera snapped back that it was way too much for this kind of job. But Tachi refused to leave anything to chance. He had to make sure his family was cared for and that he paid the right way. I'm Mary and I vowed to take care of them the right way because I love all the familiar things so much. After that, Taki put her through tough training for everything she'd need to do at the cafe while she wore that fluffy apron, which proves she's working here at this cafe. Taki barked to his familiars that starting today, Mary would be joining their ranks. And now he leaned in and laid out every one of her tasks for her. It all kicked off every morning by sizing up the familiars, checking if they were bright, energetic, and ready for action. Himari realized monsters don't usually get weaker. They stay brutal, because that's what their strength is built on. Next, Taki grabbed her attention and told her to follow him as he showed her exactly how to bathe the familiars. He dragged her to the backyard and unveiled a tiny shack. Turns out it's the bathroom for all the familiars. Taki told her she could grab the towel and anything else she needed right here. And then, he swung the door open and showed her the bathtub. Marie was shocked to find a bathtub waiting for the familiars of all things. Then he showed her the faucets that blast out hot water and she blurted out, "Wait, how does that even work?" But Taki couldn't explain a thing. So he snapped into an apology for borrowing some tech from his home country. Luke made his decision right then. He ditched the world, stripped down, and climbed into the tub to bathe. And Taki lit up with joy when the other familiars jumped into the bath with him. Then he taught her, step by step, how to wash their bodies the right way. But Henry jolted the first time she saw that monster bathing. Its fur went dead flat in an instant. Taki told her fudge is supposed to act like that after you wash it. After that, they have to be dried the right way with clean towels, no shortcuts. I'm thinking her magic could be way more convenient than all this. So she ripped through the air with wind magic, and in an instant, the familiar's fur withered away. You gotta love how fast everything got done. After the job was done, he showed her the ropes at the store how to run things and serve their customers one order at a time, as he handed the familiars over one after another. Right after he finished her training, Taki packed up a bag and got ready to leave because it was finally time to go. He ordered his familiars to hold the fort right here, guarding the house while he was gone, and told Cerberus that Himari would start showing up at the store from the very next morning onward. When the servers arrived, they asked if they could game with the customers too, and the teacher nodded, letting it happen. Then he dropped down to pet them, grinning as he promised he'd definitely buy a massive stash of Sivners from that neighboring country. Then Luke started telling you, hurry up. Then he hauled himself up to hear Luke's wild words, every frantic bit of them, calm and all. He rushed to apologize to Luke for keeping him waiting for so long, and insisted it didn't matter. He just couldn't stop because he loved every single one of them. Luke immediately panicked when he heard that, and just like that, Taki was ready to bolt. Servers lined up, saw him off, and shouted that they'd catch him later. Taki jumped onto Luke with one mission: get to the next town before sunrise, all while slipping out of sight because Luke's real size would send anyone running. Tachi leaned in and promised Luke, no matter what happens, I've got you, I'll protect you through it all. Then Luke leaned in and told him, straight up, that he was the weaker one. Taki won't be left alone. He'll step in and protect her himself. Taki trusted Luke like he was rock solid, and as they kept moving through the night, that trust never wavered. The next morning, Teaching stepped out and caught a gorgeous sunrise blazing over the mountains. And man, it felt so good because it hadn't even been that long since he'd been dropped into this world right after his grind as a salaryman, the kind who barely ever got a moment to breathe. And yeah, speaking of rest, Taichi only managed to hit the cat cafe once a month during his leave. It all flipped when he crashed into a cat god by pure accident. And somehow, after death, he got dropped into this world where he unlocked one-of-a-kind powers and even landed the chance to run a cozy little cafe. Now he even pulled in regular customers, living his best life running a cafe, all thanks to the handy skills he got from the cat god. Now he was hunched over a map, zeroing in on the Asurum kingdom where the forest cat was hiding, because if he could capture that cat, he'd finally earn the title of a true cat lover. Then Luke told him to climb on fast so they could race to the nearby town instead of getting stuck camping outside. Taki felt pure gratitude for how kind Luke was, and he squeezed his fur close, stunned and awestruck. He couldn't believe it. He snagged the forest cat faster than he ever thought possible, and the excitement hit like lightning. Right when Luke burst into a sprint, Taki snapped that going slow would still be fine, and Luke fired back, calling him weak for shouting like that to make him slow down. And he admitted that sprinting like crazy made everything feel better. Taki glanced back at the breathtaking scenery and told them to slow down and savor the view. Luke told them to get some stuff ready for later during their break time. And just like that, wham! A monster chicken swooped in from the side and attacked them. Luke yanked it down in a split second, and Taki immediately stashed it inside his magic bag. Later that night, they staked out a spot where Taki could soak in an insane view of the starry night. Luke leaned in and asked if Taki's life was really that rare. And Taki just nodded, then explained where he lived, because scenes like this didn't show up all that often. Then Luke snapped him back to reality time to eat. Taichi ripped open the bag and used his cooking magic to turn that meat into something unreal. Then it hit him. He didn't have enough ingredients to pull it off. Taki yanked a bunch of ingredients straight out of the bag. Then he fired up the cooking skill again until Sim finally served a mouth-watering dish made with monster chicken meat. And he locked it in loot for days, enough to take as much as he wanted. Luke dug into that delicious food, grinning as he praised Luke's cooking skill, then swore that every dish Luke makes is always a hit while Tachi breathed a sigh of relief, knowing Luke was truly satisfied. And then he took some for himself and tried it out. Tachi's hunger hit hard. He felt like he could demolish every single one of those meat dishes. After more non-stop traveling, they finally reached Charm Town right under the rule of the Shoku Kingdom and the Azuran Kingdom. Taichi stepped into town, and the crowd everywhere proved just how vibrant and wonderful the place really was. Taki figured they had to track down the Tamers Guild in this area first, because they'd need a place that would let Luke stay too. Luke snapped, "What are you looking at? And Tachi just grinned like, I'm thinking about how absolutely magnificent my fur coat is. Luke's cheeks flared as he blurted, It's obvious, I'm a noble fennerer. Then Taki spun his gaze around like he was hunting for answers, and somehow scored a place to crash, and Luke mocked him for how wiped out he was. Taki couldn't stop hoping he'd somehow find a little extra stamina so he could keep moving around with Luke. Luke leaned in and asked, So you really love the forest cats that much? Then Taki snapped with energy and started bragging that the cats were keeping him alive. And the second he thought about patting that cat, he felt fueled up like he had to give it his absolute best. Luke can't stop wondering what kind of battle he survived back then, and Taki blurts out without any hesitation that he's calling a company. Ever wonder how those cats were doing back at the cat cafe? And he couldn't stop thinking about how insanely fun those moments were, just playing with them. Luke suddenly stopped dead, contorting his face into the weirdest expressions you've ever seen. Tachi apologized for it, but Luke's pause still left him feeling weirdly good then. Luke caught him smirking like a total idiot and demanded to know why. And Taki said, It's only because Luke is adorable. Luke shut down that so-called noble admirer like, there's no way someone like him could be cute. And he hated being tossed in the same group as those berry rabbits. Taki told him, You can't rank cuteness? And for me, every single one of your familiars is adorable. Luke spun away from him, cutting off the moment like a blade. And Taki caught that Luke wasn't being calm at all. He was totally shy. Luke found it adorable again, then told him to go to sleep right away. Taki realized he was right, then wished Luke a good night with a smug grin. Right after they promised themselves they'd dig into something delicious when they woke up, he gave Luke a quick pat before he finally hit the sack. After a bit, they prowled around town, hunting for ingredients to test, and Luke asked Taki if dragon meat was on the menu too. But Taki shut that idea down fast because it was clearly impossible. So he leaned in and asked Luke why they didn't go for that wild minotaur tail soup. Taki grabbed 2 bowls of soup, one for him, one for Luke, and he couldn't stop eating it. It was absolutely delicious. Luke shot the same idea straight back about the suit. Then Taki leaned in and urged them to scour the place some more, hunting for even more delicious meat. Then he stepped into the queue to cross into the Asuran kingdom at the border. Luke shot the question, why not just leap right over the walls? Taki shot back that they had to do everything properly. He didn't want to stand out, just keep the cafe running smoothly, and treat the whole thing like a piece of cake with Cerberus. When it was his turn, Taki caught that exact expected shock lighting up the guard's face the moment Luke came into view. And somehow he was fine with it. And before long, he praised his co-defer. Luke loved hearing that, especially after such a small hit at the gate moment. Taki marched up to the guards and introduced himself like a fearless tamer, and shoved his guild card in front of everyone to prove it. The guards let him slip through the gates only after they checked his registration and stamped him as a tamer. And Tachi was relieved this time Luke didn't stir up a single problem. The guards demanded he take charge and handle it. And now Taichi was raring to meet the forest cats of this Asuran kingdom. Taichi rode into the Asuran kingdom's great forest town fallen like he was chasing fate straight through the shadows. And that's when he started spotting a ton of toys shaped like wolves and packed in with the other masters' designs. And Tachi absolutely loved those artworks, like genuinely couldn't get enough. He leaned in and asked Luke, Do you think these are actually well made too? And there was even one that looked just like Luke. Luke snapped at him, yelling not to lump him in with those pathetic wolf weaklings. Then Tachi said he wasn't claiming anything deeper. He was only talking about what you can see on the surface. The shopkeeper leaned in and asked Taki if his familiar was acting up with the toys. So Taki hurriedly apologized and rushed to undo the trouble. The shopkeeper waved it off like it was nothing, and he swore it was true, because when he carved it, he'd seen a wolf, and Taki's familiar looked way stronger, so they shouldn't just mash those two together. Luke perked up at that, and when the shopkeeper said he'd heard of tamers who could actually talk to their familiars, Luke's excitement shot through the roof. He asked to teach you how to hear it, and you snapped back that you already understood what the monsters were saying. And right now, his familiar is absolutely furious about getting shoved in with those wolves. The shopkeeper leaned in and demanded if he'd just rolled into the fallen town. Taki nodded without hesitation. So the shopkeeper pointed him down the right path and promised that if he followed it, he'd stumble on an inn called Forest Cat Stop. He clocked that the name could mean forest cats, but his stomach sank over one thing. Would familiars even be allowed inside? The shopkeeper swore it'd be all right because that place was actually run by a tamer and Taki's shoulders finally loosened in relief. And Luke was thrilled too. He got to stay and finish it all together. Taki followed every direction, and after what felt like forever, he finally burst into the Forest Cat Inn, where the owner of the place greeted him and ran the whole reception like a pro. Taki begged the owner, asking if he could stay here with his familiar, and the owner immediately agreed and promised him a huge room in no time. Taki shot back a grateful thanks for how fast he understood. Then his eyes locked onto a real forest cat that had somehow brought the keys straight to his room. Toddy was slammed with pure amazement. The owner proudly introduced the forest cat as one of his powerful familiars. He even said his younger sister jumps in sometimes. But for the most part, he handles the job alone, and that's exactly why he leans on his familiars for backup. Taki blinked in shock. This wasn't some fake cat inn. It was the real deal, and he immediately bowed his head and thanked the cat god for bringing him here, leaving the owner staring like, wait, what? Then Taki blurted that he'd come to tame the forest cats, and the owner just froze, staring in disbelief as he demanded, why on earth would you tame forest cats? Because they weren't exactly tough, and they couldn't pull off any special magic either. Taki told him right to his face, he loves how fluffy they are. As soon as he heard it, the guy froze in total shock, and in he clocked it too. He sized Tessie up as someone worth watching, then introduced himself as Arch the Tamer and the inn's owner, and right after that, Tessie fired back with his own introduction. And right after that, Arch admitted the truth, he used to be an adventurer once. But he couldn't get strong, so his parents handed him this final end run to inherit. The forest cats were monsters she could only subdue with his shaky teamwork skills, and because of that, Arch just didn't have the strength to tag along with the other adventurers' party. Keiichi could already picture how it all went down. Those cats had zero strength. While Arch was talking, Luke stared right at the forest cat, and in the end, Arch finally admitted his inn was struggling too, because his life had never been any easier, even outside the adventure. Taki couldn't wrap his head around it. Cats even wandered this place, of all places, and Archer spilled that there was a dirty, shameful reason behind it all. But hey, he swore he'd give it everything and serve Taki while he stayed here, and Taki practically beamed at the hospitality. And he just knew people in this world had zero love for tiny animals, maybe because they were monsters. But once folks saw their charm for real, he was sure everyone would start liking them. And on top of that, these cats weren't here to mess around with customers at all. They were only there to help with the artwork. And he couldn't stop thinking, what if the cats started playing with the customers instead, as if it could somehow turn this into a hit that everyone talks about? Now, Arch grabbed Taki's attention and told him to follow straight to his room. Then Taki blurted it out and asked Arch, pushing his voice forward, why not turn this into something where people can interact with cats? And Arch froze, completely thrown by how fired up Taki was. Then he went on to call cats the world's treasure, because those innocent eyes, that fluffy fur, and their sleek, well-proportioned bodies were basically irresistible. And they even got to gawk at the flowers, blooming over their bodies like, how is this real? Arch was dripping sweat, as Taki unloaded a non-stop barrage of cat ideas on him for a while. Luke's boredom hit hard, so he leaned in and demanded to know what Tassi was planning to do next. No matter how adorable those cats look, they're still monsters. And humans aren't just going to accept them that easily. Taki bragged that he had a secret plan locked away for this moment and swore he could pull it off the same way he does with his cafe. Taki fired off his creation skill and whipped up a cat toy out of thin imagination. Luke demanded to know what it was, but Taki tried to shove it in front of him. Nothing happened. So Luke decided to test it on cats, then sprinted over to ask Arch for permission first. Then he made you catch that amazing smell that hits your nose and makes your mouth water. And you're already salivating, counting the minutes until dinner. While Arch was cooking dinner, he spotted Taki and immediately asked, need anything? Taichi held up the thing he'd made, told Arch about it, and asked if he could play with the cats. That's when a forest cat locked eyes with Taki and Nuud, which made his heart melt as he watched the cat be so painfully adorable. Taichi barely had time to swing the cat toy before more forest cats came rushing in, drawn to the action. And he took it all in stride, keeping his hands to himself so the cats wouldn't hate him. Then he flicked the cat toys playfully in the cat's direction and instantly saw the cat wake up to what was happening. Taichi carefully slid the toy back and figured this cat teaser had to do the trick. And just like he predicted, the cat went wild and pounced on the cat teaser. And I couldn't help grinning because that teaser was exactly the kind of bait that would lure them in, then make them rush over and pounce on it with pure delight. Art stood to the side, staring wide-eyed, and he called it amazing because it was his first time seeing his cats play so happily. Taichi even admitted it was his first time ever seeing cats react this happily to his cat teaser. Taki braced himself, ready to go wild and play with cats to his heart's content. In those tear-soaked moments, Taki suddenly decided to make even more cat toys. Later, back in his in-room, Taki stared at the cat teaser when Luke suddenly called it out. He was staring all slant-eyed like nothing else mattered. Taki got startled out of nowhere, but he kept grinning like a threat, unable to stop. He jumped on the idea to crank out even more toys so he could spend even more time playing with those forest cats. Then he leaned in and demanded to know if the forest cats could actually talk. And Luke shot back that the forest cats bred by Art couldn't possibly talk. But if there was a pack of forest cats, their boss could absolutely hold a real conversation with anyone. Taki realized he'd have to break in an entire pack of forest cats just to find the one that could actually talk, which snapped him back to that wild chat with the cat god, because, yeah, it was a talking cat too. Taki got swept up in his thoughts again, replaying every strange detail of his conversation with the cats. Then the Luke whined him back to reality and demanded, "So you're making toys right away?" Tachi didn't even try to deny it, and then asterisk all the way down into that eerie, luminous calm. Taki couldn't stop wondering if what he did somehow left Luke feeling alone. Seeing that it worked, he couldn't resist. He made something for Luke too, a flying desk powered by his creation magic. And Luke clocked it too. He shot Taki a curious look and demanded, "What is that?" And Taki grinned, saying he built a flying disc just so Luke could play with it. But he warned them they'd have to head somewhere big and open. When Luke heard that, he admitted he usually wouldn't do something childish like play, but since Taki had gone through the trouble to build it with his own skill, Luke didn't mind giving it a shot. And Taki could tell right away, Luke was itching to try it, and it was honestly kind of adorable. Now he grabs a few more cat toys, a bouncy bell, and a funky little tunnel and gets right back to it. He prayed the forest cats would actually go wild for them. And once he tossed the call in front of the cat, it burst into a sprint, chasing that ball like it was hunting destiny. And he fiddled with it, eyes shining like he couldn't wait to find out what it could do. Aki totally found it irresistibly cute. But then Luke shoved him, telling him to go play with the flying disc first, and Taki caved fast, agreeing they'd head out right away. Back then, he heard strange sounds, hurried over, and found his cats rolling around like they were having the best time of their lives. He had no clue his cats could play like that, and it hit him hard. He was thrilled they were actually loving every second. Then Taki told Arts, "Let the customers toss those balls, cats will go wild playing with them." Taki let it slide for now, because he had to rush out and play with Luke first. Luke was already speeding up. Arts asked the coach if he could try tossing the ball too, and the teacher nodded like, "Go for it." He also bragged about the tunnel he built so the forest cats could race in and play. Arts couldn't believe his luck. He was genuinely thankful to have a customer like Taki. And Taki grinned, saying it was truly his pleasure to meet Arts. Now, Luke Hasten takes you straight outside to try this wild thing called a flying disc right away. Lube shoved Taki through the forest and then sprinted them into a wide open patch of grasslands. Taki thought this place was amazing, and he really wanted to grab his lunch and hang out with familiar faces here too. Luke burst in and demanded to know how they used the flying disc, and Taki could tell he was practically vibrating with excitement. And he told Luke to wait for a second. Then he hurled the flying disc and held his breath until it finally got a good distance away. Tachi turned to Lube and dared him to snatch the flying dish he just threw because that was the game. Weep didn't fully get it, and his face screamed it instantly. And Tachi fell sick to his stomach, realizing this game wasn't even famous in their world. He pushed Luke to try it first, grinning like he already knew he'd feel the rush. Luke nodded and agreed to give it a go. Then, he whips out the flying disc and hurls it straight at you. But it got snatched up almost immediately by a loop. Taki froze in shock when he realized he never once thought about Luke's insane strength before he threw that disc. Luke said it out loud. This game was way too easy, and Altachi felt the crushing weight of defeat. Right after that, Taki ditched the old plan and yelled at Luke to snatch the flying disc just as it was about to drop. Taki broke down the game step by step, and even though Luke looked totally lost, he still nodded and was ready to jump in and try it. Luke asked Shaki if it would look way more badass if he snatched it right before it hit the ground, and Shaki grinned that it'd be way more fun that way. He hurled the disc again, like he couldn't stop himself. And this time, Taki and Luke just held their breath waiting for Taki to give Luke the signal, so Luke could snap into action and catch it. Luke leaned on his instincts and lightning agility, sprinting up fast, and he snatched that flying disc at the very last second, right before it hit the ground. Luke was just as jaw-dropping as always, and Taki figured Luke was still pulling his punches because there was no way he wasn't holding back a ton while he rode on her back. Luke snapped the disc right back to him, and Taki cheered that he nailed it first try because deep down he knew Luke's kindness was real, even when Luke acts like he's mean while he talks. And just seconds after Luke told him to throw again, Taki ripped the disc from the air and hurled it again. But this time the disc slipped and flew a tiny distance by pure accident, and that meant it was basically nothing for Luke to snag. Luke shot him a mocking look like, "Is that the best you've got?" while Tachi hurried to apologize for missing his throw. Then Luke fired off. "So it's that hard to throw it?" And Taki grinned, saying, "Throwing it's easy, getting it to fly far is the real fight." Luke tested it firsthand, hurling the disc with his own hands, but it landed a single meter from them. Luke's pride burned so fiercely that he refused to quit. So he hurled the disc again, throwing it with everything he had, and this time it pushed past every limit. Luke said it was way less scary than you'd imagine, even from more than 100 meters away. Taki figured Luke's strength made it feel effortless. Then Luke told Taki to go grab it. But when Luke's request hit a nerve, Taki snapped back that this time it was impossible because he was too weak to pull it off until they kept playing for a while. He drags himself back to the inn. Wiped out then hears the sounds of some girls nearby. Taki's like, "Wait, who else could have shown up here?" Then he caught wind of it. Some girls were messing around with the forest cats using the little car toys he'd built. Taki just realized those cat toys blew up way faster and way bigger than he ever expected. Arts welcomed Tachi back and told him everyone's been having a blast with those cat toys. Then one of the girls leaned in and grilled her brother, asking if Tachi was the same guy who made them. Hearts nodded and introduced his sister, Lucy. Then Lucy grinned and said she was an adventurer right now and also running an inn with her brother. Tachi leaned in and introduced himself to Lucy too. Then Lucy hauled in two more of her adventurer friends, Marilia and Bianca. Seeing her play with those adorable forest cats made her beam with pure joy, so Bianca suddenly wanted to stop fighting monsters, not even for a second. Taki totally agreed. Those forest cats are insanely cute. He whipped his head toward the forest, spotting the cats already crawling through the tunnel he'd built. He realized this might work best if customers could actually interact with forest cats, because those little guys seemed to hit success hard, so he figured, alright, then we're going full cat mode. He figured it was a bad idea to let cats freely roam the guest rooms, so maybe he should whip up a cat tower for them. And just like that, Taki spotted the perfect empty patch on the wall, and leaned in to ask Lucy if they could build a cat tower with boards right on that wall. He told her it was just like a cat heaven somewhere cats could climb up high and crash in peace, since forest cats always crave the heights. Lucy nodded, agreed they could totally pull it off, and said she'd jump in to helping make it happen. Lucy said they had some wood stored away, so they could use it to build the staircase on the wall. Then Peishi immediately asked if it was really fine to make changes to the plan at the end like that. She reassured him, telling him not a single thing was worth worrying about, and she was dead set on making every adjustment she could, just to make sure their plan pulled off perfectly. And honestly, she wasn't buying the whole adventurer pitch either, so by the end, she decided she wanted to work even more. Take could tell she didn't just like that inn. She loved it with her whole heart, the one her parents left behind, so he decided to honor her feelings and step up to help even more. Lucy was having the time of her life teasing the cat. Then Arts King stepped in and told Lucy he decided to remake it so customers could finally interact with the forest cats. So yeah, turns out Arts wouldn't mind at all if Taki decided to slap the board up himself, and Taki was totally good with that. And he was thrilled to cook up fresh ideas like his fluffy cafe, where people could make monster-filled fantasies come true. Arts poured out his gratitude to Taki for everything he'd done, then swore he'd swing by Taki's cafe the moment the inn finally took off. Arts offered a firm handshake, his way of showing gratitude and sealing their friendship for real. Taki grinned and snatched it up, counting the days till he could jump into the Arts, while making sure his care was right there with it. Later, he stormed into the backyard storage, where Lucy was busy cutting wooden planks to build the board. Taki gushed that Lucy was doing great, and Lucy shot back that she was actually the one who handled the wood storage, so she'd been doing this for ages. That's why she pushed to take on most of the work herself, instead of dumping everything on their guest. Taki felt how much it meant, because he knew she'd been through hell in times like these. Lucy admitted she'd always dreamed of being an adventurer, but once she started, fear hit hard. She even said she could feel those worries piling up, because every mission keeps her inches from death. He asked if she planned to ride one adventure for the rest of her life, and she shot it down fast, saying she hadn't even thought that far ahead yet. Lucy grinned like treasure was just around the corner, chasing adventures so she could make life easier for her brother. And Taki couldn't help but feel his heart get touched by her steady, dependable spirit. And once the boards were finally done, they hustled over to finish the cat tower. Luke smashed into a perfect nap. Lucy and Techi finally slammed all the boards into place in that staircase-like pattern. Teki loved how her work turned out, and while Marilia grilled Lucy about whether she was always the better carpenter, Lucy snapped back, yelling at her. While Arch went and checked the boards, "We looked so good, the cats hopped right up to rest." He spun around to ask his forest cats if they wanted to give it a shot, and the forest cards rocket onto the board instantly and plop down on them like the universe was stuffing the couch with lucky, fortune-happy cat dolls. Other cats dart after the one perched on the topmost board, all scrambling to claim their spot and finally rest there. But it sparked a brutal clash, coral warriors tearing into each other for the top spot. Lucy blew up seeing those cats slumped there, glaring from their boards. Taki told her to let them slip for now. Arts then clapped loud to summon every cat in the area. They heard D-Summon's call and dropped down off the boards in a rush. Taki stared in awe at the forest cats, adorable, and they even had Obi on, too, and he felt so pumped he worried he might not sleep tonight. Then Art stepped up and told everyone it was time for dinner. He also shouted for Marilia and Bianca to come over too, because there was stew waiting for all of them. He scoops the stew and serves it up to everyone. They sat down to dinner and traded stories that made the whole night feel electric. Lucy swore she could figure it all out from here solo, as those cat toys helped her along. Taki noticed Lucy had a real gift for crafting cat toys, and now that he's helped her kick off this whole thing, it's finally taking off. Taki can't wait to see just how amazing this place turns into the next time he comes back. For now, he decided to tame his own forest cats first. The very next morning, he sprinted out toward the forest, straight from his doorstep. Luke said they could finish their work way quicker if they lured things in with some tasty bait. But Taki snapped back. This trip was for taming forest cats, not hunting them. Luke knew that, but secretly he was dreaming of catching a dragon too, so they could prey at one shot and call it a miracle. Taki figured Luke absolutely deserved another dragon steak, because he never would have made it this far without his help. Even if Taki secretly wished Luke could help tame a few forest cats without hurting them. Right then, Luke leaned in and asked, "Should we push even deeper into these woods?" Taki snapped that they should scan this area a bit longer, because forest cats were supposed to be weak and easy to tame, so they couldn't be lurking in the deeper woods yet, even after searching for a while. Taki searched the forest like a hunter, yet not one single forest cat showed up, and that was wild, since the art insisted there were tons of them roaming around here. Taki spotted that weirdness and couldn't shake the feeling they'd stumbled into the wrong forest. He couldn't resist, so he dived in himself, popped open the status, then hunted it down with his search skills to help track down exactly where the forest cats were hiding. Luke clocked Taki messing around and snapped, "What are you doing?" Taki grinned and said he was testing out a skill, trying to see if he could use it to track the forest cats. Luke stared in shock and muttered that Taki's got some seriously unique skills, while Taki himself had no idea if that talent was even rare. Then he clocked the skill on the spot, and it flat out pointed him straight to the forest cats. Taki was blown away by how accurate and simple it was. Luke got the heads up that a pack of forest cats was right there, straight ahead. Luke felt something was off the second he realized he didn't grab their presence. So he snapped his focus back on and felt its strong enemies out there, too enough to rattle those forest cats and force them to stay hidden. T'Chai figured this could spell trouble the second Luke claimed there were stronger monsters. But before fear could settle in, Luke pushed him to head into the feeding it right then. Taki got completely blindsided when his sudden suggestion hit like a bomb, and asked Luke if it was truly okay, because just earlier he'd warned them those monsters were insanely strong. Luke blurted that he was a noble Fenrir, and there was no universe where he'd ever get defeated by anybody. Luke said that from a forest cat's eyes, that monster wasn't just dangerous, it was a deadly nightmare. Then he grinned. So we follow it, and we beat it. And when he said, teaching you, he meant, plain and simple, that you'd have to ride Luke. So he turned to Luke and demanded, be gentle. But even Luke's slowness still left poor Techi in the dust. After pushing forward for a while, they finally caught sight of the monster they had to take down. That turned out to be a monster crow straight from a nightmare. Luke said that the giant crow was a cowardly monster that only hunts and feeds on people weaker than it. And when Taki asked if he could get to it, Luke just nodded like, of course, it was obvious. So he yanked Taki close, told her to hang on tight, and then launched himself up to smash the flying giant crow from above. A shock ripped through them as the crow snapped to life and suddenly lunged into an all-out attack. But Luke effortlessly slipped the blow, then shot forward and ripped at the weak crow with his shark claws. Luke crushed the crow in an instant, then snarled that he hates those monsters who prey on the weak. Luke told Taki to stash the crow's body in his bag for materials, and at that moment, Taki couldn't help but feel like Luke was finally looking out for him. Right then, Tachi snapped his head toward the bushes because something was making noise in there, and when he thought it might be another crow, fear hit him hard. Then Luke snapped, telling him not to cower behind him because he was safe with him. Taki then clocked exactly where the noise was coming from. 2 whole years of a monster roaring, mixed with cat sounds. For a split second, he froze when he realized the bushes weren't empty at all. It was the forest cats right there hiding in plain sight. Taki couldn't stop himself. He was dying to reach out and pet that cat. Then he realized the cat was staggering, its strength slipping away. So yeah, it was weaker than usual right now. Luke figured the cat had been hiding in that burrow for ages, and the moment he said that, Tachi shot over to feed it while the crow kept circling overhead. But he had no clue what to feed it because he didn't know what would actually be healthy for a frail little cat, so Luke jumped in and suggested giving it some of those bunny cookies. Taki crept up to the cat step by step, offering cookies with a slow, soothing calm that made him look totally safe. Tachi gave the cat a reassuring nod, telling it, in his own way, that the cookie was totally safe. Slowly, the cat sniffed the cookie, couldn't resist, and gobbled it up. After the cat ate, it looked like it was finally bouncing back. Taki hesitated, like the cat was moving in to thank him. And he couldn't stop wondering if it liked him because he'd been crowned the one love by all the fluffies. And either way, it looked like he was one step away from mastering it. So Taki tamed the forest cat that skittered around her legs and, without hesitation, named it Sakura. He grabbed it, and the second it touched his hand, he couldn't stop himself. He kept petting the cat because it was ridiculously cute, and Luke immediately scolded him for that messy, sloppy face again.